District Board of Directors to order. The first order of business is Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll join me in the pledge to the flag. Ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and let the record show that we have a quorum present today of all members. And our general manager is scurrying to his seat. Members, I'd like to ask that we expedite the meeting today if we can. A dear friend to everyone, or to many in this community, Clark Doyle, passed away several weeks ago, and a memorial is scheduled for this building this evening. Clark, as you know, is a World War II veteran and longtime Legion member. He was the Veteran of the Year for the county several years ago, and his late wife, Dilo, was very instrumental in the establishment of our library and securing the new one, and both will be sorely missed, so if we could expedite proceedings today, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Report from closed session, Mr. Hirsch.
I don't believe we had a closed session at the last meeting.
Thank you. Special reports, Sheriff's Department report. I did it again.
With the Sheriff's Office, Los Osos Coast Substation. I'm pleased to report to your board crime statistics for the month of March, March 1st through the 31st. There was a total of 304 calls for service in the Cambria area. 53 of those were emergency medical services calls that are dispatched through our dispatch center. We had 28 assist other agencies. Crimes against persons, there were 2. Both of those reports were threats, so no one was actually injured in those incidences. There were 2 reports of domestic violence, one being an arrest for spousal abuse, the other being a report of child abuse. However, it was resolved with an incident report only, not a crime report. There were 8 crimes against property, 1 burglary, 6 thefts, and a trespassing. I'll come back to the thefts in a moment. 7 disturbances, 33 check the welfare or citizen assistance calls, 16 suspicious circumstances or suspicious subject calls. The number of total calls for service is skewed somewhat. There was 43 incomplete 911 calls, and that likely had to do with telephone line troubles during inclement weather. There were 18 alarm calls, and then a total of 69 self-initiated field activity type calls. We had 36 traffic or pedestrian stops. That relates back somewhat to the thefts as well, and then on-site or follow-up activity of 33. Today, I'd like to speak a little bit more to the theft issue. We have experienced in Cambria a few isolated evenings where someone or group of someone's has gone out and stolen items from unlocked vehicles primarily. It's a trend that we're seeing in other communities on the coast, and it's of concern to the Sheriff's Office. In response to that, our traffic and pedestrian stops have increased to make sure that people who are moving around late at night, we're basically stopping all of those people who we have lawful reason to stop to identify what their business is, because we've had these incidences of increased theft from vehicles. The thefts primarily, and I say primarily because there is one circumstance where there was an expensive piece of electronic device that was stolen from a vehicle, and the perpetrator broke the window to get into the vehicle to get that. However, all the others were unlocked vehicles, and so, you know, as typical, a thief will go around usually late at night looking in vehicles that are parked in front of residences. Using a flashlight, they'll identify something inside the vehicle that they would like to take, either electronics or wallets, purses, or change in a ashtray, that sort of thing. They'll try the door. If it's unlocked, they reach in, grab what they want, and move on. If it's locked, they just move on to the next car. So we are really encouraging the community to make sure that they lock their car doors and that they remove all valuables from sight, either placing them in the trunk or taking them into their residence at night.
Thank you, Sergeant. Thank you for that report and that suggestion to our community. Any comments from the board?
Please. Is the theft in a whole general area or specific areas?
There was, I believe, mainly in the Lodge Hill area. I'd have to check those statistics. But the problem, you know, obviously the solution to the problem is directed at the community at large. And again, in Cambria, it's only been about 3 or 4 isolated evenings that we've had the problem. In Los Osos specifically, we're having the problem 3 or 4 nights a week. And so when there's interaction between the groups of people that are doing this in Los Osos and in Cambria, we don't want the problem to spread to where we're experiencing the same kind of circumstance up here.
Thank you. Director Berninger, then Director Rabbitt.
Yes, I observed a fella walking down the street and checking all the car doors. Well, is that something that you can call 911 for? I mean, the guy's just checking car doors.
That
what's
would
your
be a
thought?
911 call. We would consider that to be a crime in progress. If someone is checking multiple car doors,
Right.
they probably don't have business in all of those cars. And so that would be a high-level response that we'd like to be made aware of by 911.
This particular individual looked like he may not know where his car was, so he was checking them all.
Yeah. Certainly, if you just observe someone who's out of place or may look like they're looking into cars but not actually touching anything, and you can't articulate that you think they're actually committing a crime, you could, people could call our non-emergency dispatch number at 781-4550. Same dispatchers, but that would also start a response to the area to check on that subject. But if you actually see someone engaged in behavior that to the reasonable person looks like a crime in progress, 911 is very appropriate.
Director Rabbitt.
Okay, hi, thank you. Well, and in response to the guy that maybe just couldn't locate his car, maybe it's a 911 anyhow, because maybe he ought not to be behind the wheel.
Absolutely.
When you give your report, it's always very, very helpful, and it is specific to Cambria, I think. And so I really appreciate it when you give us kind of the proactive heads up very much, you know, that you're seeing a trend, not here at this time. But also, I think it's helpful sometimes when you're giving the general categories, if possible, if it's in your report and you can do this without too much time on it, to let us know particular trends that are kind of subsiding and trends that seem to be on the increase like you did today. So I just want to say thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you, Sergeant. We appreciate your report.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Fire Department report. Chief Miller.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. You have in your packets, you have our stats on our run statistics and thing for the month of March. One thing that I wanted to take a moment to point out, we're starting to see an uptick in the responses to wildland fires. And as everybody knows, it's been a extremely dry season, winter season this year. So we're predicting that it's probably going to be a fairly active fire season this year. And I'd like to request all the members of the community, anybody, any homeowners, residents, that they take the time to look at their defensible space issues around their personal property and maybe take the time to deal with some of that and be proactive with it. We're getting ready next month to roll out our weed abatement, which deals with the vacant properties, vacant parcels in town. But the privately owned homes and the yards there need to be looked at, and it's a community effort. It's not just the fire department's thing. So I wanted to take just a second to point that out. It is looking like it's going to be a big year for us this year. So operationally, over the last month, the Coast Unified School District and the fire department and the sheriffs and a coalition that's been formed in the community to deal with hardening the schools and the active shooter scenarios has met. The last month we had a meeting up at Camp Ocean Pines, a full-day event. It was a seminar. There were several of the sheriffs there that were teaching different techniques for the teachers for safety in the schools. There's been grant money that's been appropriated to harden the schools. And I had the pleasure to teach the incident command system to the staff at Coast Unified School District. And the progress that we've made in the area is pretty amazing, and it's an ongoing thing. And you will undoubtedly hear more about it as we move forward. I think we're going to invite Jerry to come down to witness one of our drills that we're going to have for the middle school next month. So Jerry's presence has been requested there. So, but that's an ongoing thing, and you know, it's all in light of the stuff that we've seen at Sandy Hook and Taft and those type of events. This last month here, a couple of weeks ago, Bob Gressens and I had the opportunity to attend a Emergency Management Institute drill back at the National Fire Academy. It was on the grounds of the FEMA campus in Emmitsburg, Maryland. It was a week-long exercise in disaster mitigation and recovery. They spun up a drill. This was 70 people from around SLO County that were involved with this, mainly from the South County, but along the coast as well. We were able to have a first-class simulator at our disposal to use, and a program that had been put together specific for San Luis Obispo County in dealing with the events and the cascading scenarios that spun off of a tsunami. And it dealt a lot with the emergency response part of it, but it went deeper into the mitigation and recovery efforts and how all of the agencies within, not only emergency responders, but how all of the other agencies within the public sector would play into that role. So I think Bob got a lot out of it. I think it was a very well done exercise, and possibly moving forward here within the next year or two, we may end up having another one of those that's specific to the North Coast area. And that would be done in cooperation with Morro Bay. So currently we're in the process of trying to put together recruitment. We're running a little low on staff. A lot of our personnel have been getting picked up full-time by other fire departments, which is a good thing for them. It's not so good for us. I mean, it speaks well of our organization that we're recruiting good people and and they are doing well enough to get picked up and you know, be of interest to the other departments. But it's definitely a stressor for us, and currently our numbers are a little low. We look to pick up hopefully 4 or 5 people here within probably the next month or two. So with that, we continue to work with the healthcare district to you know, in the efforts of the shared services, and hopefully to roll out a workshop for the public in a month or two. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Director Clift?
Mark, under the prior administration, in times like this with the wildfire high, we often sent an engine or crews out of the area. Now, under your administration, we haven't done that. Will that continue to be your basic?
That was under my administration. We had a little different scenario with our personnel and our staffing at the time, which doesn't exist today, that made that possible. We had DeClerc and Upton were qualified as officers and were always available to us to back up in town. I don't see that on the horizon for us unless we can work. We've actively tried to work out agreements with Cayucas and Templeton fire departments to where we could maybe send some of our personnel out on a combined team to where it wouldn't stress out our staffing levels. The training and the experience that our people pick up on those type of situations there's no way you can get that any other way. So I would really like to advocate for that and try to do that where we can, but our staffing levels at this time aren't going to allow us in the immediate future, but we'll look to do it down the road maybe.
Okay.
Director Robinette?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chief Miller. On the training that you attended, first of all, I'm certainly pleased that you were there. And I would like, just as a follow-up, not right now, but to look into the possibility of really the benefit that we could have by expanding the expertise that you have now from attending that meeting. I'm thinking tsunami, but I'm thinking in general that, of course, I think the most important people to feel informed on what to do is the public. And so I am interested in talking further with you about maybe starting with CERT. That might make a natural kind of group to start with. On emergencies in general that would be the result of a tsunami, like we run out of water or it's contaminated, that type of thing, and how we might do an outreach in the public so that people could proact and be prepared ahead of time. And it would make your job a lot easier too, that people wouldn't be calling you individually to say, what do we do now? But that they would feel pretty comfortable that they've taken the best reasonable steps they could to be prepared, rather than, you know, after kind of a hindsight.
Yeah, as you know, that's an ongoing thing that we try to deal with through public education on an ongoing basis. The CERT team is a big part of that. There's a number of the personnel on the CERT team that are trained, that are part of the team, but there's an equal number of folks that take that training specifically just for that purpose, to kind of know, you know, what to do. They have no intent of being on the team, but are taking the training to know personally what they're going to do in the event of, you know, of any type of an emergency situation where they may have to be self-reliant. Yeah, that's a point well taken, and that is part of our mission for sure, is the public education component and how we can impact that, and we try to make that one of our main parts of our mission. You know, there's a lot more a lot more progress that you can make being proactive with it and being out in front of it than trying to recover from it after the fact. And as far as involving more people in it, I think you're going to get a chance to have a hand in some of this too, moving forward, and you'll be hearing about that in the not too distant future. So,
Thank you.
Okay.
I in fact have my CERT vest, my CERT hat, and I think that is excellent training. But
Yeah.
I'm really looking to, on the public education side, just talk with you further on.
Yeah.
Pretty accessible things for anyone in the community if they're wanting or thinking, gosh, you know, am I prepared, or are there things I could do? Thank you.
It's a big deal because it's a small, isolated community, and if an event happens, we're going to be on our own here for a while.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
there's
right.
not going to be a lot of forces coming in from the outside for a while because the rest of the county's going to be having their own issues to deal with. So, yeah, it's a point well taken, and we definitely need to be proactive with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I know the community appreciates your efforts and those of your men and women, and also in terms of your work in the schools. I think that's really important. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no presentations today. Sure. Public comment, we have 2 requests to speak. First, we have Mr. Jim Webb.
Good afternoon. My name's Jim Webb, resident in Cambria. I would like to just comment that from the day I moved in, my next door neighbor was Clark and Delo Doyle, and much loved neighbors, good neighbors, and we miss them a great deal. It's really sad to see Clark gone now. The presentation, and I'll try to be brief, I think should be categorized as good news, and I've provided handouts for all the board members, for the general manager and secretary. And I'd like to start out by directing your attention to the colored brochure that folds out and ask you to open it up. And what it shows graphically are our local marine protected areas that are near or adjacent to Cambria. And I thought it would just be helpful, as I'm going to describe a 5-year evaluation of the effectiveness of these marine protected areas, that you get a clear view in mind of where they are and what they are. In particular, right in front of Cambria is the Cambria State Marine Park, which was actually established in 2007 when the marine protected areas on the Central Coast were approved, and then was ultimately adopted by the State Parks and Recreation Department in 2010 and became the state's first underwater park, Cambria State Marine Park right here. That designation means that there can be no commercial activity within the park, and that the park is designed specifically for recreational use, and primarily people who recreate in the water, fishing, surfing, scuba diving, you name it. The area just south of that and adjacent to it is the White Rock Conservation Area. That's off of the Ken Norris Ranch down there. And it basically is a reserve in all respects, which means no extraction can occur at all. But due to the fact there was an active kelp lease at the time of the designation, it was termed a state conservation area instead. The crown jewel, in my opinion, along the coast is just north of us at Piedras Blancas, where we have a full-blown reserve from shore out to 1.5 miles, and then from 1.5 miles out to state waters at 3 miles, we have designated a state marine conservation area. The only reason that was called a conservation area as opposed to a reserve is because we wanted to allow trolling for salmon and albacore when they're in that area. Outside of that, no extractions allowed, no bottom fishings allowed, et cetera. So this is the area we're talking about, and these are the areas that by the law, by the Marine Life Protection Act, which was passed in 1999, once a network of marine protected areas was established, they had to be evaluated, scientifically evaluated after every 5 years to see if they were functioning according to the designs put in place. And that's what has occurred, and the results of that evaluation were reported recently at a 3-day symposium up in Monterey, which I attended, and have also been presented at a symposium in Morro Bay about a month ago. And I've been going around trying to communicate this information to the community through various outreaches to Friends of the Elephant Seals, Friends of Piedras Blancas Light Station, et cetera. And I thought it would be pertinent to bring that information to your attention as the town moves forward. So as I mentioned, the network in front of our area was established in 2007, and it's a network of 27 or 29 marine protected areas. The state continued on region by region until the entire state, the entire coast has now has a network of marine protected areas established. Over 120 marine protected areas to date. How do they gather information about what's happening within a marine protected area? Well, one of the ways they do this is by looking at what's happening outside the marine protected area. So adjacent to and comparable to a marine protected area will be a reference site. And scientific studies will be done in both locations to determine what's happening within the marine protected area and what's happening outside the marine protected area. If you look at this map of the Piedras Blancas Reserve, what you'll see is this area right here to the south of it that runs from San Simeon Point up to an area we call Lone Tree. It's got a little group of cypress trees on it. I think it's Caltrans Vista Point 4, technically. Anyway, this area down here is the reference site for Piedras Blancas. So what that means is when studies were done in Piedras Blancas, comparable studies were done here at the reference site, and then the data was compared. The information that's coming out of the reserves seems to indicate that they are functioning as designed, and the purpose of that design to a large extent was to provide increased biodiversity and abundance within marine protected areas and to safeguard those areas from exploitation and catastrophic change. So some of the results that have come back in only 5 years, scientists I would describe were surprised. They didn't really expect to see much of a change within 5 years because a lot of these species are very slow growing, and yet nonetheless the data did show an increase in black abalone, which just recently went on the endangered species list. We do have black abalone right in front of Cambria, in fact, on the rocks there at the mouth of Santa Rosa Creek. It's an endangered species that they were able to see an increase in size within marine protected areas as compared to reference sites. Also, the owl limpet, I don't know if you're familiar with that creature, but it's a nice sized mollusk that sticks up on some of the intertidal rocks. And they saw a pronounced increase in size of owl limpets within marine protected areas as opposed to reference site. And of great importance to me as a recreational angler was the increase in cabezon, lingcod, black rockfish, and a number of other species. The second page of this handout will give you a chart showing increases in biomass for a number of recreationally important rockfish species exist right off our coastline. And as you can see, the majority of them have shown increases within marine protected areas, sometimes as many as 4 times as many animals in the marine protected area as outside the marine protected area. One of the sort of...
Okay, excuse me, Mr. Webb, we've gone considerably over 3 minutes, but I thought
Okay.
your report was most informative, so I did turn off
Okay, sorry about
the
that.
timer, but...
I will wrap it up expeditiously.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I was only going to point out that What we find in the marine protected area is the catch rates are higher, the maturity of the fish is greater, they are more reproductively mature, and that we've also found through the study of these areas that the reference sites adjacent to marine protected areas do in fact have similar composition of species as within marine protected areas. So they are valid comparisons. All right, with that, thank you very much for your patience and tolerance.
Thank you, sir. Very informative. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Mr. Ron Bates.
Hi there. My name is Ron Bates. I'm pleased to be a Cambria homeowner for over 8 years. May I first say thank you for your continuing efforts and moving forward to solve Cambria's water problems and for revisiting the need and advisability of our rigid water moratorium. This is a bold step that you are continuing to take, and you are commended for having the courage to do it. Your willingness to consider even the tiniest percentage of growth gives hope to people who have waited so long to see progress toward the realization of the dream of owning a home in Cambria. It seems clear at this point that the majority of Cambrians want the change that you're working to provide. Many people support your efforts to move forward. I know you recently heard from Cambria business owners in a public meeting, and so you know where they stand, the majority anyway. I assume majority. Then there are many people who own property in Cambria who cannot vote because they are not full-time residents. I appreciate that you keep those folks in mind. Also recently there was an editorial in the Tribune published April 1st titled "Cambria Must Set Water Rules and Revise Growth Cap," which spoke favorably and encouragingly of your efforts and your common sense approach to solving the water problem. I sense that you as individuals and as a board understand that you represent all property owners in Cambria. All property owners pay taxes and fees every year to help pay for the services required to keep our city safe, healthy, and growing. It is a pleasure to have elected officials who stand by their campaign promises and put intelligent effort, hard work, and creative thinking into fulfilling those promises. Your actions are noted and appreciated. I also would just like to slip in a quick support here for Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve. I hope that you will approve their request and help them. They do a wonderful job out there, and anything that can be done to help them is good for the city. I would also like to echo the Cambrians article in the about the sculpture symposium up at Camp Ocean Pines. This will be my 3rd year attending. It's wonderful. The artwork is beautiful and unique, and the artists enjoy discussing their work. So it's a wonderful outing for a family or for anyone who appreciates art. Also want to echo the Cambrian, the CCSD number in the original community directory coming out today should read 927-6223, or see page 10 for the correct number. I want to congratulate all those who were elected in the last election, and I want to offer a special congratulations to first-time Director Rice. I know that the intelligence and diligence that I have observed in you over the years will serve the people of Cambria well. I'll leave you with a quote, as I usually do. This quote is from The Universal Traveler by Don Koberg and Jim Bagnall. "The most profound choice in life is to either accept things as they exist or to accept the responsibility for changing them. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you, and thank you for accepting the responsibility to make the changes necessary to move Cambria forward."
Thank you, Mr. Bates. We have one additional person wishing to speak, Lynn Harkins.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Lynn Harkins. I'm a resident here in Cambria. Long time no see. I didn't know that Jim was going to do this presentation on the great advances that unanticipated, many of them as a result of the MPAs. And so it's certainly germane to what I want to speak to you about in public comment, which was motivated by Shirley Bianchi's recent letter in which she expressed some concern about saltwater intrusion, and with it, the saltwater pushing our secondary treated effluent up San Simeon Creek. So she expressed those concerns, and I thought it's time to say something in a CCSD meeting about why are we not discussing tertiary wastewater treatment? Why, when San Simeon is, Cayucas, Morro Bay, Los Osos, all those communities are dealing with the troubling, but they regard as the absolute necessary reality of moving to tertiary, full tertiary treatment of their wastewater. And so I'm curious, I know you're not bound to answer me today, but why is that not a focus of this board? Why is this community continuing to send secondary treated effluent up, which perks down, not enough, it doesn't get enough treatment through natural soil penetration up before it's in the lagoon of the San Simeon Creek Natural Preserve, the state park, and then it goes out into the newly designated Cambria, the first underwater state marine park. We as a community are putting our wastewater out there without treating it to the level that we very well know how to do and should be diligent about doing. You know, there is a crude colloquial expression, which I shall euphemize by saying that some people think that their nitrogenous waste doesn't have the same odor as everybody else's. And, so I'm afraid that I have to put that to you, that as a Cambrian, I am not proud to be a member of the only community on this coast that isn't cleaning up after themselves, isn't diligently focused on that. And what we put out into that ocean is our responsibility, and I think we're shirking it. Thank you for your time and your work.
Thank you, Ms. Harkins. Okay, moving to managers and board reports. General Manager Gruber.
Thank you, President Thompson and board members. I'll try to keep it brief.
I'm sorry. Agenda review, additions, deletions, pulled consent items. Are there any items pulled from the consent calendar?
I'd like to pull 2 items from consent, D and F.
Okay, any others? Okay, we'll pull those items and consider them separately at the time.
I would like to, on item F, I will not be commenting on that particular, whether pulled or not. That particular property is within 500 feet of my property, and it's
Okay.
inappropriate for me to.
Duly noted. Moving to the board reports and managers report, Mr. Gruber.
Thank you, President Thompson, board members, and I was just given a clicker. I don't know how to work it, so we'll, thanks. I'll let Bob, here, Bob, I'm going to let you click this, but not now, okay? Don't click now, Bob.
DNF.
I'll go over the reports briefly, and mostly what I'm working on right now with staff is the budget for next year. We're working with the different ad hoc committees, and we'll be meeting with the budget ad hoc committee on Monday to review the first draft of the fiscal year 2013-2014 year budget. The budget committee will be reviewing everything except conservation and the wastewater budget. We still have not finished the draft of that, so working diligently on focusing on a good, strong, balanced budget this year, that represents improvements to the infrastructure. SR4 well is back up and running. However, we're adjusting some little glitches in it, but we do have it back up and running, and we're fine-tuning it, if you will, working with Rob Frazier from Frazier Electric and Pure Flow. We are working with the district council on an administrative policy that direction was given us to the by the board with the intention of the implementation of releasing a limited amount of water meters. We anticipate, if everything goes well, and Bill Madaus finishes a little bit of work that he has, that we'll be able to bring that back to the board for consideration. Prior to that, I would like the administrative ad hoc committee to review that, which would be President Thompson and Director Robinette. One of the responsibilities of that ad hoc committee is to review changes to the municipal code. On page 8, as Mr. Bates indicated, the article from the Tribune, Cambria must set water rules, revise a growth cap. I thought it was a very, very good article. I thought it captured accurately everything that we want to do, and it was I thought it was very well written. On page 9, we have roughly $4.6 million in our LAIF account, and I'm just going to continue through. Page 13 is our debt service. Mark talked on page 14 about the fire statistics and some additional fire statistics on page 15. And the district engineer's report is on page 16. The interim utilities manager report, which is something that the board will be making a decision on today. That's Mike Finnegan's report is in here. On page 18, that really should read senior wastewater operators report instead of wastewater supervisors. So what we're having now, again, what you need is more reports, but we have now Mike's report as utility manager, and then what I've asked is for individual reports from the lead wastewater operator and the lead water operator to let you know what's going on maintenance-wise. Page 20, the water department responded to 100 calls. Last month, because we were in a transition period between utilities managers and we were making some staff adjustments, I did not have the well data that usually is part of your board packet, and it is included now and is brought up to date. It has been a very dry winter, as everybody knows. Our wells are holding their own, and but what we want to do is really get the SR4 well in the mix of using both the San Simeon and the Santa Rosa Creek aquifers. On page 23, we are going to work on these graphs, and I know that's just going to make everybody really happy. With change in staffing and change in leadership comes change in ideas. I like what Mr. Bates said about, you have two options: to stay where you are and to move forward. So you'll continue to see changes in this. Page 23, I look at it and I go, what does it really mean? So we will hopefully by next month we'll have a report that's easy for you to understand. We have on page 27, this is the Facilities and Resources Manager's report. Carlos continues to do a lot of work on the ranch and to our facilities. And the Administrative Officer's report on page 29. We do have 5,502 points in our points bank. That seems to be a question that's asked quite a bit. We do have to still transition some inspections that were done on retrofit upon resale. Our points bank is up to date, but the 5,502 represents a little bit lower than what we really have in the points bank. With that, what I would like to do briefly is, over the next 3 months, do PowerPoints on some of the improvements we've made to the infrastructure. This month I wanted to focus on wastewater. Excuse me, next month I wanted to focus on facilities and resources, some of the things that Carlos has done. And then in June, when you adopt the budget, we'll go over some of the things that the water department has done. So if we don't have any technical glitches, and I have the assistance of the district engineer, we're going to go over a brief PowerPoint presentation and help you visualize some of the repairs that we've made. CCSD Water Wastewater Department 2012 projects. So these are the projects we've completed as part of this fiscal year. And what I would like to do is every year, at least maybe twice a year, bring to you the things that we've done, the things in the budget that you've approved to show the board and the community the improvements we're making to the infrastructure. Bob, go ahead. Maybe we'll. Collection system lift station alarm panels. This is lift station 1B alarm panel. We rewired lift station B1 alarm panel, installed new alarm auto dialer. Next slide, please. And these are before and after shots. You know, so you can see that we were getting a lot of phantom alarms. In other words, we were getting alarms that really didn't represent an emergency as it related to that particular lift station. And those alarms were based on the fact that there needed to be some house cleaning done on those. And so by reducing the alarms, we reduced the overtime, we reduced the call out to the staff. So we reorganized and rewired lift station 4B alarm panel so that you got a before and after. I want to thank Mike and the wastewater department for these. Next slide, please. This is lift station A1 alarm before and after. Again, we replaced and upgraded the A1 alarm panel. We added several new alarms to improve the lift station monitoring. Next slide, please. A collection system lift station pump panel upgrades. Due to their age and poor reliability, we upgraded and installed new pump panels at lift station A1 and B4. Also, the pump panels were located down inside a dry well, which is considered a permit-required confined space entry. As a result, 3 operators were needed to perform weekly lift station inspections, normally performed by 1 operator. By moving both panels above the ground, we eliminated potential hazards associated with confined space entry and increased time management efficiency. And so we have 10 lift stations, and all the pumps and panels are below ground, which requires a confined space entry permit and 3 people. So we've removed 2 of those panels, we've lifted them out of the ground, and we have two or three more budgeted for this upcoming fiscal year. Next slide, please. Lift station A1 pump panel, that was the panel that was down in the ground before. I don't know what that is. That may be a hose, but it also may be a piece of conduit. I'm not really sure. That was the old one, and that's the new panel. And you can see we have a touch screen. If you look on to the right, it gives us SCADA data, if you will, to help us determine the future sizing of that pump station. So we have real-time data now. So we basically cleaned it up, and that is above ground now with a NEMA 4 panel. And if it's in an area that's in a neighborhood, we try to make it as aesthetically pleasing and hide it so we don't it doesn't cause problems for the neighbors. Next slide, please. This is lift station 4B pump panel. Before, you can see that it was just a bunch of wiring, and every one of those relays can be problematic. They can fail, or they can also send an alarm. So all those ice cubes or relays that you see on to the left there on before, on all those wires, it just really improves the probability of alarms and failure. And so what we did is the after panel, you can see it's nice and tidy and clean, and we have the touch screen. And then this will be probably the standard that we'll adopt from here on out. Next slide, please. A new pump panel, the HMI control screens. Again, this gives you empirical data. It shows you what your pumps are doing. You can get real-time data from what's occurring at your lift stations and your wet wells to be able to make educated and good decisions for the future of our infrastructure. Next slide, please. Lift station 1B generator replacement. So the old generator, you can see that was in pretty bad shape. These generators are important. If we lose conventional power, they have an automatic transfer switch, and they will run the lift station. So we still have several of these that we need to replace. Next slide, please. This is the lift station 1A generator replacement. We installed a new Kohler generator at lift station A1 due to ongoing mechanical problems and poor reliability. So this is a new generator. As you can see, it's really close to a house, so what we did is we spec'd it out that it runs very quiet. So if we do lose power and it goes to generator power, you don't have, you know, the neighbors in that house over there aren't hearing a generator. You can barely hear it. Next slide, please. Lift station A1 generator transfer switch. This is installed new transfer switch at lift station A1. Automatic transfer switch, essentially when you lose conventional power, it switches over and allows the generator to run. It's an automated system. And I think that says new, I can't read it, but anyway, that's the new one. Next slide, please. Lift station potable water supply project. The lift stations have no access to water. One of the questions that was asked by one of the directors a couple board meetings ago, and I think I answered it through an email, was why were we spending water funds on lift stations? And it's important that you have water at lift stations for a whole bunch of different reasons, but if your pumps go down, you need to prime them, you need to clean up the work area, you need to be able to reprime the pumps. So due to the particular type of pumps we use that sometimes lose prime for one reason or another, in order to reprime them, we would normally fill the pump casing and the volute with water. However, because no water sources existed, the operators were manually opening the discharge check valve and back flushing from the force main. This method should only be used in an emergency situation and poses a safety issue for personnel. OSHA regulations and standards operating procedures require access to a safe water supply within the addition to the backflow devices. So we've also put backflow devices in, so there's no possibility of cross-contamination. Next slide, please. So this is lift station A1, lift station B, and lift station 9. We now have potable water at those lift stations. Next slide, please. Lift station number 4 and lift station number 8. The three pictures on the left show how over time buildup occurs inside the valve, restricting flow through the pipes. Buildup inside the pipe decreases pump efficiency. By replacing these valves, we increase pump efficiency and we saved on electrical bills. So that's what it looked like before, and this is what the new vault looks like with the new gate valves and the isolation valves and everything there. So next slide, please. Wastewater treatment plant, and I'll try to get through these. Wastewater treatment plant and collection system main alarm panel. These are two central alarm stations that continuously monitor the entire wastewater department 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If an alarm occurs anywhere in the plant, our collection system, it will be immediately notify personnel. So this is what we've upgraded there. Go ahead, next slide. New grit removal system. Wastewater contains rocks, sands, and inorganic materials that we simply refer to as grit. Grit damages wears out our pumps, valves, and other important equipment used to process wastewater. So the grit machine went, it failed, and so we put a brand new one in place and have that installed. And the staff did that in-house. Wastewater influent, next slide please. Wastewater influent pump station panel. That was the old panel on the left. That's the main panel for the lift station. And the new panel, this was about, I think it was about $80,000, and the old one, if you can see, it was all pressure activated with gauges, and it was a mess. So that's the new panel and that's at the headworks of the plant. Next slide, please. Waste activated sludge, WAS flow meter replace. The wasting flow meter is a critical component of controlling the activated sludge process. The old meter malfunctioned and was replaced in November of 2012. So we put a new flow meter on and I won't go into the importance of this, but we replaced the waste activated sludge, the WAS flow meter, and digitized it so we can make internal adjustments to the plant that will result in a better effluent going out of the plant. Next slide, please. PLC and MCC Motor Control Center. To prevent electrical fires, the Motor Control Center staff inspected and cleaned all the connection breakers and contactors to the plant. The picture shows how the dust and dirt accumulated, increasing the likelihood of electrical fires. Next slide. Air valve replacements. We reduce odor by injecting and regulating air at different locations within the plant. Unfortunately, these valves no longer could operate because of rust, so we replaced all those. Next slide. Air valve project. This was before, and that's the after slides. Next slide. Aeration basin number 2 cleaning project. It's extremely important to remove rags and debris at the beginning of the wastewater plant. When the rags and debris are allowed to pass through and collect and settle into the aeration diffusers at the bottom of the aeration basin, 40 to 60% of the wastewater's electrical bill is from operating blowers that feed oxygen to the activated sludge process. As time goes by, rags accumulate over the diffusers, choking off the air supply. As a result, blowers' speed is increased. It's after lunch, so go ahead and slow this slide if you want. Next slide, please. Aeration basin number 2, when rags and debris are allowed to pass through, they collect and settle in the air diffusers at the bottom of the aeration basin. And that was quite of an accumulation. And we do need to make some modifications to the wastewater plant. We do not have a rag removal system at the wastewater plant at the headworks. We only have what they call muffin monsters, which are really archaic, and so we need to address this as we look at improving the wastewater treatment plant. Next slide, please. As time goes, this is aeration basin number 2. As time goes by, rags accumulate over the air diffusers, choking off the air supply to the plant. It is an activated sludge plant, so you have to have air. Otherwise, you don't have an activated sludge plant. Next slide. Pictures on the left show how rags and debris settle and plug the air diffusers. As a result, operators increase blower output and the maintained dissolved oxygen concentration. So basically, the guys went in there and ripped everything out and cleaned it all out and put the diffusers back in and got the tank back up and going. This fiscal year, we have 2 aeration basins. We'll do the next one this fiscal year, or next fiscal year, rather, I'm sorry. Go ahead, next slide. Aeration basin number 2 cleaning. That's a person down in there with a dumpster and a little hand truck. So it was quite a bit of debris down in there. We probably got, I don't know, 40 or 50 yards of stuff out of there. Next slide. Aeration basin number 2 when finished. Next slide, please. Non-potable water pump controller, 9P7. Our non-potable water system is an essential part of our water conservation project. It allows citizens of Cambria to use non-potable water for agricultural use. In addition, it uses for watering football fields, parks, and medians. We still need to, this is a tracking system that will enable us to determine who gets water and how much. We still need to bring a policy back to the board with regards to what we charge for this water. And we also need to put a chlorination system in here that will help us provide a better water to the community. The next slide. School visit. Mike's done a really good job. We're working collaboratively with the school district in using our facilities as teaching tools to them, the lab, the biological process of the wastewater plant, and that's a continued effort that we're gonna do. So next slide. And that's it. And if there's any questions, I know it took a little bit longer than thought, but I think it's just important that the board sees that that Mike has got a lot done in the wastewater treatment plan and collection system over the last year, and we'll continue to do so. If there's any questions that you have for me, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Gruber, and please thank Mr. Finnegan for a job well done. I think it certainly demonstrates the type of job he's doing there. Any comments, Director Robinette, Director Rice?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I think actually applause is in order for that. I think that's really, that's a job well done. I think certainly the wisdom to say a picture is worth 1,000 words is really, really true here. To me, I just have to say it's very, very helpful because we hear about lift stations, we hear about pump stations, we hear about this, we hear about that. But when you see it like this and you see the upgrades, when you see the improvements, when you see the, you just feel better. Before you go to sleep at night, you're going to feel a lot better, I think. All of us will. And I'm being very, very serious because I think this is our work, to know this, and the public's interest in it to see this. So to me, I thank you because it's very, very helpful. I think going above ground is a great idea. I happened to meet some of the crew that one day, and there are 2 in the hole and 1 out because the person was very helpful, and he said, well, there are two other guys down here, and he said, essentially what he has to do, of course, is stand watch, because what if something happens in the hole? And so we have two now above ground, is that correct?
That's correct. In long term, what we're going to want to do, and I'm working with Bob, and we're going to want to look at taking our pumps out of the ground, and that's a little bit more expensive to do, but really just put them in a wet well environment where you don't have to have them in a dry well environment. That's just a technology that's not even used anymore, and it's pretty expensive to do, but long term, that's what we're going to need to do. We're going to have to do away, abandon those type of systems and go with a railed system and a wet well system. But two out of 10 and 3 more budgeted for this year, so we'll be 50% done with raising the panels up out of the ground.
Well, I just see great advantages there. And you said, you know, you will make them more neighborhood friendly, so to speak, and that's certainly like the cell, you know, when we put in cell things, they look like trees. Well, no one that knows what trees looks like really believe that, but they have made an effort there. They've told us they're trees. So anyway, I just really appreciate what you're doing, because when you see the before and after, actually it is frightening to see what was out there. And it's really impressive and highly commendable to you, your leadership, and the entire staff that has worked on this to take us this far along. So thank you.
Director Rice.
I also say thank you very much for doing that work. I just had a couple of questions. How does the alarm system updates fit into the SCADA that we've been looking into?
They're still incorporated into the radio SCADA that we have, and when I use the word SCADA, it's probably not the right terminology, because that's supervisory control and data acquisition, which really doesn't provide us the information. It's essentially alarm system we have. So it is not incorporated into the water SCADA system that we currently have not installed. So it's more of an alarm system that's phone based versus radio based.
So we would be replacing these again when we eventually install the SCADA, or is this something that would be in addition to the data acquisition?
I think one of the things that we need to evaluate, and I think the board's kind of directed me towards this, is to really evaluate what we have. Is it cost effective to go, you know, and have that installed, or do we need at some point in time to look at another system that would incorporate the water side of it too? So, you know, that decision with regards to what we have and what we paid for, that's still out for a discussion and an ultimate decision by the board based on staff recommendations. So.
Okay, and the cleaning up of the aeration, was that part of what's in our sanitary sewer master plan?
No, the SSMP specifically relates to the collection system.
Okay.
The slides that you saw are the wastewater treatment system. It is a activated sludge secondary wastewater treatment system. Those accumulation of those inorganics was really a design flaw in the plant. You know, you usually have some kind of pre-treatment at the headworks of your plant that remove those. And so Bob and I are working on, and it should be a relatively high priority. Two things should be a high priority at the plant: installing something at the headworks that captures those things, and then the electrical cost and the area, the DO and the dissolved oxygen and the motors and all those things. So Bob and I feel that those are the two highest things out on the priority list right now as far as the wastewater
So the
plant.
SSMP doesn't cover the wastewater treatment plant, it's only the collection system up to the plant?
Right.
Okay, that was my
it's the collection
misunderstanding
system,
then.
yes.
Just a couple of other quick things. I had requested that the well production be included with the reports for in addition to the well levels, because I think that that's a useful tool. I know I always end up every month going and getting it off of the website, but it would be nice to have it included in the packet.
Okay.
Progress. I was also curious if since it's going to be such a dry year, Santa Cruz already has declared that they're cutting. They're going to be they're imposing restrictions on water use. I was wondering if we were going to run the model, because you said that, you know, if we were going to maybe have a dry year, that it maybe would be the time to do that. And April and May is supposed to be the time to do that, to determine whether or not we need to have surcharges, because in the code, we're supposed to rely on whether or not the model says we need to impose surcharges, and I would hate to not have that prepared in time because of the lead time required for surcharges. Hopefully, we won't have to do that, but.
It's my understanding that we're going to be bringing that model in May. Am I correct on that, Bob? It's a November analysis and an April, May. No, you're absolutely right. And the purpose of that analysis is to determine, based on the evaluation of that modeling, if surcharges are necessary to implement. And I defer to Bob on that on May's agenda, Bob.
Yeah, to date, we're actually doing very well, relatively speaking, for as dry as it's been. I think right around Easter, we had a rainfall that helped some, even though it wasn't that much. It did help. We can certainly have that run by the May timeline. I've been watching the well levels, and you know, they're doing a lot better than I would expect.
With the retirement of Jim Adams, I know who was always very cognizant of the well levels. I just want to make sure that we're using all the tools we have available to make sure that we protect our water supply. The last thing that I wanted to say is I wanted to again bring up whether or not you've made any progress on the monitoring and validation of the reduction of water use based on the retrofits and things for remodels and going forward. I absolutely want to make sure that we have a way to validate that, yes, these houses were retrofitted so that this person could build. Did those houses actually use less water? Because we're trying to go for a net zero, and we're not doing a 2-to-1 retrofit, we're just doing a 1-to-1. So we need to make sure that that water is actually no longer being used by those houses so that that house can use that water. And without a way to validate that, it's very worrying to me to continue to, I mean, I think a few new houses is one thing, but to continue on with a program, I definitely would want to see some monitoring and validation.
My suggestion would be I think we need to determine to what extent we want to do that, and what I would like to suggest is that the Conservation Committee meet with you and Director Robinette, and then we come back with some kind of recommendation to the board, because as we discussed yesterday, we don't want to get so far down the path that it's going to be hard to go back and calculate all this data. So after talking with the Administrative Services Officer, Monique Madrid, yesterday, we believe it's something that we can implement. It's just a matter of getting some direction from the board and the Conservation Committee regarding to what degree. And so I think it's a good idea. I just need some direction and then a recommendation from the ad hoc committee. And if that could happen, then we could probably put it on the May agenda and discuss it further.
Yeah, Director Beringer.
Real quick, for sake of brevity, when you were redoing the aeration ponds, how long had it been since the last time? And the buildup we saw took how long?
It was my understanding that it was a 8 to 10 year period.
Okay.
10 to 10 year. It had never been.
Just long overdue.
Yeah, long overdue. Long overdue.
Mr. Robinette?
Just one last comment, because when you were talking, Bob, about the where we are currently, actually, you and I had talked not too long ago too. So actually, everything was recharged at this point, right?
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. So even for some reason, with the very dry year we're having so far, we're in pretty good shape. And then the other thing, just as a quick comment. I agree, for the people that are now wanting to change out, get different washers, washing machines, and upgrade to the current state-of-the-art retrofit, I would think in a way that it would be fairly, I mean, we'll talk about it, but since everyone is on a meter, we could monitor that and get some empirical data and evidence that, yes, it is making a difference.
Yeah, and we would just need to come to a consensus on, you know, what span that would include, and if you wanted to do possible sampling.
Sampling, you see, I think
You know,
sampling's
yeah.
a very powerful way to
Yeah.
do that. Yeah,
So-
that would be, give us a trend.
Absolutely. It would be easier to do it now, you know, as long as we can agree on a methodology. I think that's important, that, because sometimes when you ask questions, 20 more pop up. And so we want to be able to accomplish that, but we want it to be able to be manage it also. So, yeah.
Right. And just last thought, and it's on a slightly different page, so to speak. You are just so proactive on this, just reading my mind, I think. I really commend you for wanting to revisit the current format of the graphs so that we could actually make sense out of them. I think that's going to be a great thing, and so I look forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gruber. Moving now to member and committee reports. Are there any reports from members that, Director Rice?
I attended the North Coast Advisory Council meeting, and they had some further discussion on the Kingston Bay project, and Supervisor Gibson wasn't there. He was on his way to a meeting somewhere in San Diego or something. So it was a much shorter meeting than they had been a couple of months earlier. The main thing that came up to me was the mitigation for the PG&E, the trees, the 88 trees that PG&E cut down in 2009 for part of the reliability, is going before a hearing officer on May 17th. Let's see, I've got it here. Friday, May 17th. They will be going before the minor use permit for doing the mitigation for that.
Any other reports? Director Robinette, then Director Clift.
Yes. I attended the pros meeting and the Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve because they're kind of hand in hand there, and just some of the things that were talked about. It is really, I think, working very well, the mutual support from Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve and pros looking together at trails, and so there was quite a discussion on the protecting the wetlands on the ranch and what to do, because we have so far started, and Carlos has been very involved with this, and I was involved with this. We set up what we felt at least was a little bit of trying to divert people from crossing over on the boardwalk. Many times when people are visiting and they see that there's maybe the Marine Terrace Trail or another trail, you know what they do, they just walk and take off. And it's interesting, I hadn't known this until I got so involved. One person walking across open space like that actually begins to create the new trail. And I thought it would take a lot more than that. So what's happening is we have the wetlands where you know, the birds migrate and all of that. We had put just a sign, please, you know, under restoration, please don't walk here, cross here. Well, I guess then that was interpreted as, well, yeah, don't knock the sign down, just walk to the left of it or the right of it. And so that's not working for what we want. So what they will be doing is, and I think it's the next step, and it's really rather in concert with the state park system and the way they do things too. We did a highly conservative just with the signs because on all of our ranch, we don't want people to feel restricted, and yet we do want to restrict them. So it's a tough one. So anyway, what we are planning to do now is to look for some funding and put what the state parks do. And they have a little, just a light rope kind of cable-like thing with just little poles with a little circle at the top, and they actually enclose the whole rectangular area. And that's going to help, I think, a lot. Now, we're putting fences back on the ranch again, and we need to have some gates. So from the pros meeting, when we were there the other day, the discussion went in this direction. So what do we do for people that do want to cross over and head more from west to east or vice versa? And this is where I think the collaboration really is nice, because it went from that discussion to one of the pros commissioners, Tim Roche, who does serve as our representative to the county, the county like Parks and Recreation Commission, and he represents Cambria. They have grants. And so the suggestion was made, and actually I made the suggestion, that maybe the way to really address the problem of people just taking off and creating all these trails that look like spider webs when you're doing GPS work on the ranch would be to actually build at some key point a boardwalk crossing going from west to east, because it's going to protect the land and it's going to be much more obvious. This is a real live crossover. And so, but where do we get the money? Because we all know and recall how much it costs to do the boardwalk in the first place. But so what's going to happen, probably Joyce Renshaw and Adolph Atencio and Tim are going to go to the county meeting and get all the information on perhaps what would be the requirements for a grant for a boardwalk. So I'll keep you posted on it. So that was the most exciting thing. And then the other thing coming up later in our agenda, and that kind of a from FERP to pros, and that has to do with donations and some things that are being proposed to include on the ranch. So that's my report.
Thank you, Director Robinette. Director Clift?
I just wanted to do a quick update on the Shared Services Committee. We've had some formal and some informal meetings, and we're at a kind of a point where we have to make some kinds of decisions, and it appears that from the standpoint of shared services, it's working exceptionally well on the operations side. Chief Miller's done a good job of putting together what the potential is from the standpoint of the operation and the involvement with the actual personnel. The problem is, legally, we may not be able to do it. And so we're following up some leads right now, and it has to do with some quirks in the law. And so it's not a matter of it's something we can't do functionally. It may be a matter of something we can't do legally, and we'll have to do some work on that. And so there are some activities going on there, but it'll be a while before we get to some conclusion on the. And what it has to do with is what's the authority of each of the different agencies and what their people can actually do. And so to get mutual benefit from both agencies have to get mutual benefit, or it doesn't make sense. And right now, we're kind of in between. And so that's where that is. It will probably be stalled for a while. So if you don't get a committee report in the next couple of months, it's still underway, but there's some technical things we have to do. That's all on that.
So work in progress. So Director Rice?
So does that mean that for now, we still are going to be working to get together operationally while they figure it out?
I think right now, for all intents and purposes, it'll continue on like it is, but there won't be any formal
Thank you.
kinds of things.
All right, we are now ready to move to the consent agenda. Items number D and F have been pulled from the consent agenda, so they'll be handled separately.
I would move approval of the consent agenda less D and F.
Thank you,
Second.
Clift. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. So we will now take up item number D. Mr. General Manager, would you introduce the item?
Thank you, President. Thompson and board members, before you today is item 7D, considered to adopt resolution 142013, authorizing the execution and delivery of an installation of a sales agreement, authorizing and directing certain actions in connection with the acquisition of vehicles. This is relating to the purchase and financing of two vehicles. The first is for the administrative staff and for the board, which is a Ford Fusion. The second is for the fire chief, which is an XLT Ford pickup truck. I did send, there was some inquiry regarding, let me go back to where our previous vehicle went to. We had a Prius that we owned. You've maybe seen it around town, a little blue Prius. And when staff was driving it, we hit a deer. The deer was okay, but the Prius was not. Yeah. So we salvaged it through SDRMA, and we got, I think, approximately, $7,000 to $8,000 for it, which was an incredible price. And then we turned around and we were able to sell it to a dealership in San Luis Obispo for another couple thousand. Now the question that was asked is, where did that money go? Should it have went back into the budget under replacement vehicles? It was just absorbed into the general fund, and so the money that we got for the totaling of the Prius and the money that we got for selling it just went back into the general fund. There was also some additional questions regarding Chief Miller's vehicle, and I do have Chief Miller here, but I just wanted to, I sent this to the board, but I'd like to take a few minutes if you don't mind. As far as a new vehicle is concerned, you asked for information about why we are ordering an XLT vehicle that cost $8,000 more than the utilities vehicle. The rationale for the extra expense comes from several reasons. I thought that it was important to order a crew cab for the capability of transporting extra crews or people for both emergency and non-emergency purposes. The crew cab has an additional expense. I will also need a center console, upgraded electrical package, and a limited slip differential. These came cheaper as a standard equipment with the XLT package. I needed the console and upgraded electrical package to accommodate my radio gear, pre-planned manuals, command forms, maps, etc., as well as the siren and light bar in the radio charger unit. The limited slip was recommended by our mechanic for off-road response and towing. I also ordered the vehicle with the EcoBoost 6-cylinder engine to make it economical to drive back and forth and to all my meetings. The extra price also included a light bar and siren and shell for the back to stow my gear and to keep it secure. Another point of note is that the truck will probably be subjected to pounding and it will not be subject to pounding and general abuse that the work hauling vehicles used by the utility department. My guess is that the truck will last at least a few years longer and will be in service for at least 15 years before needing replacement. The vehicle that Chief Miller is driving back and forth now, I came to the board several months ago and asked that he be able to drive that back and forth. That particular vehicle, and Chief Miller is much more technically informed about this than I am. That particular vehicle was really a vehicle that was used for responding to emergency conditions, and it functioned also as a mobile command center. So we want to return that back to service. And then the Fusion, which I think we got a really good deal on, is one of the goals of the board is that we continue training at staff level and board levels, that we become a district of certification, all those, we become a district that's certified, and all those things are going to require us to travel back and forth. Currently, the staff is using their own personal vehicles to pick up mail and to run errands during the work scheduled day, and I have some concerns with that. As far as financing the vehicles, I think it makes sense. I know that we're paying a little bit more in interest over the long term, but it is something that we can absorb into the budget a lot easier than paying a capital amount up front. So, with all that information, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. And I did ask Chief Miller to stick around a little bit on the purchase of his vehicle.
Director Rice, you had a question on this.
Yeah, the reason I pulled this had more to do with the financing than justifying that you need the vehicles. That's more about making sure that the district is able to accomplish what we are set as policy. But as far as how we spend the money, whether or not that should be coming out of even maybe the LAIF fund, I don't know what the current interest rate is on the LAIF fund, but this agreement with Municipal Finance Corporation, which is, as far as I can tell, is, approved, it links to it on the CSDA website, but we don't even know the specific interest rate. It's 3.25 to 3.5% range, and that seems kind of high to me. And we also, in addition to the $7,000 or $8,000 we got from SCDRMA and selling the Prius, we sold surplus vehicles for another $7,000, and we're selling 2 more based on this. It seems like that almost is the cash right there to pay for the Fusion. And the Municipal Finance Corporation on their website, they make loans between $50,000 and $10 million. So, it seems like we're paying for a service within the financing that we could easily absorb by spending out of reserves, but maybe that's just my personal, and I wanted to bring that to the board.
Thank you. I think, was a Prius, is that a Honda or a Toyota?
No, it's a Toyota. It was a car that was my understanding that we got through a grant process. And one of the questions that was asked by one of our constituents is how many miles it had on it. And it only had 44,000 miles, but it was probably a 10 or 12-year-old vehicle. So it's the batteries that you really need to be concerned about after that.
I think beyond that, I think it's important that public agencies in this country purchase vehicles and equipment to the extent they can from companies that are located in this country. I think the idea of purchasing a Fusion produced by Ford is a good idea. I think it's an important policy consideration. Director Clift?
You know that I've been an advocate of paying off some of these things, but and I would not have a problem taking money from LEAF to pay these off. However, from an accounting standpoint, what you're doing here is matching expense to usage over the 5 years or so, and putting some stabilization in your budget by doing it that way. I think it's probably just the board, whether the board's policy is to pay these off, or whether to say, okay, we pay 1/5 of them this year, and next year in the budget we budget 1/5 again. And to do that, yes, there is some interest cost in doing that, but it might provide stabilized budgeting rather than big ups and downs, because apparently we replaced almost all the vehicles this year. And if the service vehicles for the water and wastewater departments all come due again in 5 years, you get this jump rather than just saying a leveling over all the years, a certain budgeted amount for the use of a vehicle. A lot like leasing, but we have the advantages of probably being able to go 10 years on some of the vehicles rather than just the 5 you're paying for them.
Director Robinette?
Okay, and I was kind of also just wondering, now, we have sold how many vehicles to date? 3 or 4?
I believe we've salvaged, excuse me, I believe we've salvaged four trucks altogether. I may
Sold,
be
right?
off, I might be off by 1 or 2. Yeah, these were the old vehicles. We've purchased through this procurement process, through this financing option, 4 new vehicles. And that was 2 for the water department, 1 for the facilities, and 1 for wastewater. And what we did is we just built in a $500 a month payment per vehicle, per department, as part of the budget, and that's essentially how we're paying for it. I did have concerns of bringing a $97,000 amount to the board for 4 vehicles, although we got a heck of a deal on 4 vehicles. Again, it's easier to absorb the cost of vehicles through, if you will, the operations process versus buying them outright. But that's a policy decision, and staff's receptive to whatever direction you want us to go.
Well, where I was kind of headed with this is if we have sold, including the Prius, 4 or 5 vehicles, my question then actually is, so how much did we receive totally for, since we seem to be doing most of all the car purchasing this year, how much did we receive in total? That was my first question. Secondly, then, since we're going to go ahead and make some additional purchases and we're deciding on how to finance it or what to do, I want to know how much have we already received from sales? Wouldn't it, rather than going into the general fund, I would think that we would take all that and would have at least we would have used it as a set aside to get one of these new cars. Because it just gets lost in the general fund, and it actually came from autos in the first place.
Well, when I say general fund, you have to understand that the fire department and the administrative departments are funded through the general fund. The vehicles that we salvaged are enterprise funds, the water and wastewater enterprise funds. So the sale of those salvage vehicles really need to go back into the water and wastewater budget. The administrative and the fire department are general funds. They're funded not through enterprise mechanisms. So when I say the sale of the Prius went back into the general fund, that's how that went. Now, it's a very good point. Could we salvage 4 vehicles? Why can't we? Because it's water and wastewater money, and those vehicles were specifically used for water and wastewater functions. So we could put them back into water and wastewater vehicles.
So they'll be paid for then, however, out of water and wastewater?
The new vehicles or
Yeah.
the ones we purchased?
Uh-huh.
Yes, we bought 4 vehicles, 2 of which were for water and 1 was for wastewater and 1 was for facilities and resources. If you look at the budget, there's a $500 per vehicle per month allocation as part of the budget. And so those individual departments pay for those new vehicles.
Right, okay, so essentially, that's just clarification then. The money from those other vehicles actually went back to benefit the budget that's paying for the new ones. Okay, then a couple of other,
I was hoping to make a motion or at least a quick question. Did you make a down payment on those vehicles? No?
I don't believe we did.
So if we're financing, at least the money we got from selling the vehicles could be a down payment. The rest is financed. Then next time, 5 years from now, when we sell those vehicles, that becomes a down payment on another one. It has budget stability, but yet at least we reduce the amount of debt that we start with. It's the thought.
Yes.
yeah, okay, that's a good follow-up there. So then the other questions I have would be this. On the squad car, the 5757, the squad vehicle for the fire department, is there such a vehicle or something that's used in place of this at this point? It's just, here he comes, here comes the chief.
The answer is no, but I'll let Chief Miller answer this one. See, I told you weren't just going to get this vehicle with no questions being asked.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I understand that, and that all the questions are good. The department owned a GMC vehicle that was a squad. It was officially Squad 5757, and it had a lot of problems with brakes and that kind of thing because of the weight. So we took a lot of the equipment off of it and lightened it up and turned it into an Encore vehicle, and took the vehicle that I'm driving now and replaced that in and used that as the squad. And we had some shelves, rollout type things to put the equipment on that you could put extrication equipment on and roll it out. It's got a light tower for scene lighting and stuff on it that was used, which is what you need at night for vehicle accidents and things that if we're going up the coast and that type of, over the side rescues. So that unit was in play as the squad around the time that I was approved for a vehicle, and that was the only thing that was really available to use that was, that could go either way. So we pull it out. Currently, we don't have a squad in service per se, so.
Okay, so actually, for this type of vehicle, we have your vehicle currently, and we're going to replace that and make that the squad car.
Yeah, we would put that back in as Squad
Okay.
5757.
Okay, very good. And the car that we're looking at then, and at first I thought it said Ford F-150 4x4 EcoBlast, but thank heavens that's not what that was. What it means is that it's a six-cylinder then.
It's a V6 and it gets a lot better mileage.
Okay.
So that was a concern as well with, I had heard some comments on driving that around and putting that kind of miles on it, although that's good for a diesel, which the one I'm driving now, the Squad, is a diesel. It's good to put miles on it and keep it driving, but it's not really efficient as far as fuel. So I felt that would be a savings to go with the EcoBoost V6 as opposed to a V8 motor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Are we ready for a motion on this?
I move that we approve Resolution 14, 2013, authorizing the execution and delivery of an installment sale agreement and authorizing the directing certain actions in connection with the acquisition of vehicles.
I second it.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, now we have item 7F. Mr. Gruber?
Thank you, President Thompson. We are fortunate to have some staff members, David Foote from the San Luis Obispo.
Flynn.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at David Flynn, and we also have, is it John Fanar? Well, I goofed up both names. We have them both here for the county regarding this matter. Item 7F is consideration to approve a covenant between the Cambria Community Services District and the County of San Luis Obispo for preservation of the Riparian Enhancement Area Main Street Bridge Replacement Project. What you do also have in front of you is the conceptual habitat mitigation and monitoring plan as it relates specifically to the riparian enhancement that is going to occur as part of the bridge project. I know there was some concerns relating to this. The item was pulled, and we do have county staff here.
Okay, we have two requests to speak on the public comment. So we'll hear the public comment first and then bring it to the board after that. So first one is Lynn Harkins, then followed by David Flynn.
Good afternoon again. My concern about this is that my understanding is the county has not kept you apprised of changes in this project. For instance, did you receive the mercury testing results that they did in January and March? All right, well, you may or may not recall that I appealed this project to the Coastal Commission, and they came very close to granting a de novo hearing. They were concerned about the levels of mercury that I found, and that was much less than what the county found in January and March when they were required to test by the Regional Water Board for this project. So it's just the idea of forming a covenant with an entity that's supposed to be your cooperative partner, and they're not keeping you in the loop of what's going on in the watershed for which you have direct responsibilities, stewardship responsibilities, doesn't seem to me I'm not comfortable with that. I just don't, I think you deserve, and the public, the ratepayers need to know what's going on in our watershed. So to approve a habitat mitigation plan when you don't know what the project is, to enter into a habitat mitigation plan that does not, when you have no idea of how much is going on there. Now, when they applied for this project and they were asked how much of the creek would be disturbed, how much stuff would be moved around, the county engineer, Corey Marshallek, said about 1,500 cubic yards, which is, if this room is 20 by 30 by 60, that's one of these rooms full, so just visualize that area by Main Street, that bridge by the dog park. But where they are, what actually says on their water board permit is 5 times, 5 of these rooms full of material that they are going to be moving out of there. And so the words dredge and fill have entered into our watershed up there, and those words were not used in the initial project approval. So 5 times this amount of material is a pretty stunning increase in the project. Even if it's backed off to half of that, it still is a stunning increase in the project and opens it to the need for an amendment. You should know what's going on, the public should know what's going on, and this permit needs to be amended and opened up to review of the consequences of the increased levels of mercury that were found there, how they're trying to handle it. They're trying to dig it out of there, and they don't have a mercury fate and transport expert that I've been able to find. I've talked to Caltrans, I've talked to National Marine Fisheries. National Marine Fisheries wasn't even told that there was mercury in the watershed. This has been, I don't believe that our watershed has been well represented in this process, and that you as a board, I would like you to consider asking that this project be brought before you, explained to you, and you see if you don't think maybe it could use a little bit more analysis for its impacts. 5 times bigger than what we were told.
Thank you, Ms. Harkins. David Flynn, perhaps you can shed some light on the comments that you've heard.
Yeah, good afternoon. Dave Flynn with Public Works Department. Before you today is really a covenant to take a portion of the CSD land that's located on Main Street, just south of or across from Santa Rosa Creek Road, and utilize just over an acre of the easterly edge of the property where it enters into the creek. And this is being requested to essentially fulfill mitigation requirements that we have as part of the regulatory permits that we've secured and the environmental document that was done for the project. And this is a project that's been underway for quite some time. I would say we've actively been pursuing it for about 8 years. The goal is to replace the bridge that's located over Santa Rosa Creek, dated, I think it's like 1929, so it's certainly seen its life. It's a bridge that has very narrow width to it. We've had a lot of vehicles struck on the railing to the bridge, and we want to enhance that bridge by having something that's going to last into the future. So as part of progressing through the work, it's gone through an environmental document, several regulatory permits, and again, what's before you today is really securing the mitigation area. The mitigation that's going to be placed will be offsetting some of the removed riparian habitats, willows, other type of riparian plantings. John Farhar is here today as he's our environmental resource specialist for the project and can answer any of the detailed questions relative to the mitigation plan. On the mitigation plan, it's really at no cost to the district, as really our forces would go in there and maintain it, monitor it, and just oversee the plantings in conformance with our requirements for permitting on the project. The project will be going in, and first it would be constructed over 2 seasons. We are advertising the project now so that we could commence work in July of this year. And it will take 2 seasons of work. We'll have to go in there and excavate materials in the creek to place some rock slope protection for the new bridge. And then in 2014, we would be coming back to remove the existing abutments in the, that exist in the creek today. That's really our extent of the work in the creek, but with that, there is disturbance of habitat and mitigation. And we certainly appreciate the collaborative effort and opportunity of putting the mitigation on the CSD site. You know, I think we both work towards providing infrastructure for the community, and this has just been a long-term project that we would like to see for the community. The county on the whole has put a significant amount of effort on doing bridge repairs in the North Coast region in the last 5 or 6 years, and this is the one that's probably taken the longest, but at least from our perspective is the most important because it provides that southern gateway into town, and you know, is essentially a kind of a choke point collision area. When we do this work, we're going to end up with a bridge that has you know, clear span, so there's not going to be any additional supports in the creek, which enhances the flow and flooding concerns along the creek. And then, you know, we again will be maintaining the mitigation. Essentially, for the first 5 years, we have to make sure it's established, and then once it's established, again, we see there's little maintenance. And I know the district has some interest in you know, getting a trail established on that thing, and that's certainly, we wouldn't be entering into those areas that would be problematic for trail construction in the future, or wouldn't preclude the CSD's plans for the ultimate utilization of that parcel. There was one little element that was submitted with your agenda. There was a correction on the legal description. We deleted one reference to Rancho Santa Rosa, which was incorrect, so that's part of the action. In general, you know, we appreciate you considering this. We certainly request that you accept staff recommendation for approving the covenant. Be happy to answer any questions, or if you would like me to respond to some of the particulars that Ms. Harkins had, I'm happy to do that as well.
Well, let's do this, Mr. Flynn. You probably would have been more, not necessarily under public comment, but under, as a representative of the county. Why don't we hear from the other public comment at this time, then we'll bring you up for response to questions from the board, and also for you to answer the issues the questions that have been raised by Ms. Harkins and or Ms. Webb. And if you would, Ms. Webb.
Mary Webb, Cambria, just speaking as a citizen. Lynn Harkins did contact me about this project because, you know, it was appealed to begin with, I don't know, a couple, 2 or 3 years ago when we were involved with a lot of other appeals at the time, and it was just barely approved by the Coastal Commission, and that was with mercury levels that I think are, you know, something like 3 times less than what the mercury levels have tested at in January. So I am a little concerned that, I mean, I did contact Bruce Gibson and Sherry and his assistant to ask about these mercury levels, and I did get a letter response back from Mr. Flynn that I did send to Amanda just to notify her of what the new news is on this project. And so I am a little concerned that this new mercury information has not been given to you, and that Mr. Flynn didn't just speak to it, and that it's not the news, that's not an 8-year project. This is a new project now that's got new information. That's what happens when you come back with a project and you really do testing like on site right before you start to dredge the creek. So it's not just that they can uncover mercury, that's when they take out all the willows, the mercury can become methylated, which means that it gets put into the environment. It gets taken up by the fish in the creek and then goes further down into the creek, and it can even affect the health of kids playing at the mouth of the creek. So it's a big deal, and I do think a new bridge there would be great. It's a huge bridge. It's going to take out a lot of the support stanchions that are in the middle of the creek, which will probably be good. But I don't think this habitat mitigation and monitoring plan is enough. I think the cost of the project has increased, from like 1.5 million years ago to maybe 3 or 4 million now. With this new cost of the project, the county, in conjunction with the CSD, could actually mitigate the mercury that is occurring at the headwaters of Santa Rosa Creek. And that seems to me more like what should be mitigation for this project, not giving you some little 1-acre wetland restoration somewhere on the side of the creek there. It's a major thing. And what I read in an article is that to mitigate the mercury at the headwaters of the creek may only cost $500,000. That could definitely be put into this project. So most of my comments I gave to Amanda, so she's got that. Unfortunately, I didn't copy myself on that letter and all those things, so I don't have all that in front of me. I don't think you really understand what needs to be mitigated. So you have a project that you're mitigating when you don't really know what is going to need to be mitigated. So maybe their environmental representative can talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Okay, Mr. Flynn, if you would again, perhaps you could respond to the issues that have been raised under the public comment, and then I'll bring it back to the board after this.
Certainly, Dave Flynn with Public Works. Yeah, the project that was kind of mentioned by the speakers was that it has changed. And again, the project really hasn't changed. We have had additional concerns, regulations elevated and looked at as part of the project, but the project itself largely has not changed, particularly since it's gone through an appeal process to the Coastal Commission. There's really been nothing that's changed over the environmental document. So let me be kind of clear on that. One of the speakers also mentioned about the magnitude of the excavations that would be done in the creek. That's really approximately 3,500 cubic yards, 3,500. And in terms of the proportion of the size of this building or this space, I didn't really write down all the math there, but we're talking about 3,500 cubic feet. So that's well within a normal excavation. It's not an unusual amount of excavation. So there is definitely creek disturbance, but it's not a large-scale creek disturbance. We've done this several times in the past on other projects, upstreams when we've repaired Santa Rosa Creek due to washouts, or even more recently, I think a couple years ago, we replaced the Farashi crossing, the low water crossing there, and replaced a new bridge. If anything, the Farashi project had much greater disturbance than what we're talking about in this location. And there was no issues with that on mercury. In terms of mercury and turning our attention to that, it's certainly a known fact by everyone that there was, particularly up Curdy Creek, mercury activities occurring from the 1880s, and that is a background element in the whole creek system. I think one of the speakers, Ms. Webb, indicated that, we're requesting you to approve some mitigation for this project that's relative to that mercury issue. And that's not the case. That's not what the riparian plant habitat mitigation is all about. The mercury issue is its own separate issue, which is addressed through the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the permit or certificate that we've received from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. The areas that we've measured, in conjunction with getting our certificate for Regional Water Quality Control Board, is still well within, drinking water standards and all practical standards that you would see or measure. Nonetheless, we are, we've submitted a sediment management plan for the disturbance of this 3,500 cubic feet of material that's been reviewed and approved by local regional water quality control staff. And that is really to take our excavated materials during the construction process, stockpile it on site, tarp it, protect it, but then test it and see if it is something that has significant levels that would potentially need to be trucked off site. And that's something that would be just the mitigation that this project has relative to the mercury. Our funding source for this is Caltrans primarily and FHWA, and they're agreeable to do the mitigation, the cost involved for material handling in the creek, but it's got to be relative to the project itself and the disturbance that the project itself has incurred. The suggestion that perhaps it would be more cost-effective to go upstream to Curdy Creek to do some type of mercury remediation project, is well above and beyond what the project is undertaking, and well over and above what our funding sources really would allow or authorize. So, that's a separate issue. The mercury, it's being handled through our certification with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. We have procedures in the contract and a sedimentation management plan to work with that during construction to really safeguard the material, test it. If it is at a significant level, we would expect to just export it, the 3,500 cubic yards, to the Cold Canyon landfill and utilize other materials. Generally, that material is going to be displaced anyway because we're going to be putting in some larger rock slope protection material in the creek just to protect the abutments of the bridge. I think that pretty much touches on the elements that the speakers had brought up, but I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Okay,
you have, as
Director
well as
Rice
Mr. Farmer.
pulled this from the consent calendar, so Director Rice, I'll let you.
Okay, so I pulled this from the consent calendar because of the word covenant and that this agreement runs with the land that's owned by the CCSD, and we didn't get this habitat mitigation and monitoring plan until today. And I have no idea whether it's been vetted by any of the local people who are quite knowledgeable and interested in these kinds of things, because we're being asked to approve this today because they want to get it going forward. This was revised in September, and if you look at the agreement, there's a signed date from the county council in November, and yet it's April, and this is the first time we're seeing it, and we have an incomplete staff report to go along with it, and we just are supposed to go along with it. Well, I think in my opinion, it's my responsibility, since it's a CCSD property, to make sure that it's being appropriately addressed. Isn't there already habitat in the area that is going to be the mitigation area? So essentially, we're going to have a net loss of habitat, because I mean, there's something already there. It's not just blank land that they're going to put new trees in. I'm also concerned if this is going to affect the use of the dog park, and the mercury issue is an issue, but it is not related to what we're being asked to approve today. And one of the things that I would really like to see is there's all kinds of reporting in here, and we are not one of the agencies. We should be getting the reports. If they're doing tests on the mercury, we should be getting those reports. And they're going to send notices of completion to the Army Corps, to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, as well as other agencies. Why aren't we listed here? Because this is the long-term maintenance of this property. This is our property in the long term. Whether or not the county sets aside the money or not, this is still property that we are responsible for, that this community owns. And to not be included as one of the agencies that's notified that, hey, we're done with this project now, here's what's going on with the maintenance. And I think that it's important that we're included so that we know it's our property. If we were private property owners instead of a public agency, you would think that we would be included, but maybe I misunderstand the way those things work. Because I don't think it's about the money for maintenance. That's not my primary concern. My primary concern is that we protect the property that belongs to the community.
Director Behringer is not participating in this discussion. Let the record show that. Director Clift and then Director Robinette.
Yes. It seems to me that all the county is asking here is permission to use our property. And that the project itself has already been approved and gone through the process with the authorities that have legal responsibility for the land use and and such. One of the disadvantages of not being a city is that we don't have authority to say a whole lot about the land use around it. And so it seems to me that as I read this and I read the mitigation, that we're simply being asked to give the county the right to use 1 point so acres so that they can meet the requirements they have to mitigate the disruptions that they're going to take in putting in the bridge. And so it's not really in our authority right here to go back and review the project or ask the project be changed or delayed. It's really whether, I suppose as a private landowner, can you do this? And so I guess the question to me, and a question I guess I would have of our staff, is that do we benefit by this mitigation effort? And if we do, then I don't have any problems with it.
Mr. Gruber?
I think the original concern was if it is the riparian habitat area is enhanced, is it going to be, maybe Mr. Dave can answer this question, you know, is it going to be of vegetation that is not going to impact the land that we currently have? If you look at it now, I went out there day before yesterday, 2-3 days ago, and walked it. It's pretty bad shape right now. So I think that we would feel comfortable if there was two things. If the vegetation that's planted is conducive to that environment, and the second one is, will you take care of it in perpetuity? Those things. So.
Mr. Flynn, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, on the vegetation, we have essentially our own crews that we direct to place things, and we essentially will plan on a strategic basis and kind of infilling certain areas, but primarily it would be along those slope lines that would not prevent, say, the future development of, again, the trail or other uses on the lot. So we're primarily looking at planting willows, riparian habitats to just really provide some creek enhancement and habitat area for that. And again, I think that would, as Jerry points out, is kind of an enhancement for the overall area. If I might go back to just Director Rice's comments as well. To be clear, I mean, we would certainly want to report back if you have what would be an encumbrance on the property for this use. We can certainly provide an annual report, just like we would do to essentially the regulatory permit agencies that want to see the mitigation, and that can certainly be sent through your district staff. Just going back on the mercury issue, there was some discussion about why we didn't declare or mention there was mercury on it. Well, the testing was upstream. It wasn't really in or on the CSD property. There wasn't anything that we felt that we needed to report to the districts at that time.
Director Robinich?
Yes, you can stay up there if you want. Really, just it's an obvious question, but I still just want a response. So you're in the process of replacing a bridge, and why do we replace bridges?
We replace bridges because they have a certain life cycle. Generally, 75 years out of a bridge is a considerably long life, particularly when you look at the age that it was built back in the late 20s. So we also replace them, and particularly in this case, because of the narrowness that they really are functionally obsolete. just the layout of that bridge and the fact that they have no shoulders really has seen, it's really seen its service life, which was for, you know, less volume, less traffic load on the street.
Horse and buggies.
So it's, yeah. It's clearly a factor of safety.
Exactly, is essentially the integrity of the bridge. The enhancement of the creek is also a side benefit because we're removing a lot of the center structures for the stream flow.
Okay, thank you. The conversation for me has been also, I think, a whole other kind of thing to stay with and not forget, and that is this whole idea of the mercury, and you have addressed that very well for your parameters and what you're doing, but I think it's a conversation that we need to pick up at another time about the whole thing. So, thank you.
Director Rice?
I would just like to, I would like to see this board encourage them to CC us on whatever monitoring is in. I mean, they don't need to do a special report for us or anything. They can just CC the other reports that they send to other agencies, I think. And it being rushed through without the full information, it really bothers me. This goes with the land forever. I want to make sure that it's right, and I'm not comfortable with it right now because I feel very rushed, like we didn't have good information to begin with. Whether or not there's mercury, whether or not the bridge should be built is completely separate from what we're trying to consider right now, and I understand that. I don't have a particular position on those other things. Right now, my concern is making sure that the land that we're responsible for is going to be responsibly taken care of.
Could we, if this item is approved, could we ask that that we also be included on the distribution list for any reports or relevant documentation that goes forward on it?
Yeah, Dave Flynn with Public Works, and absolutely. I mean, we try to work very collaboratively with the district and you know, promote things that are a benefit to the community. Again, it's not like we're going to hire an outside contractor to come in on the site. We really have our own staff that does the mitigation for our various sites. And so we have a long-term commitment in both of our abilities and then our cooperation we would see with the district. So we're happy to provide those annual reports that we would do, you know, as well as, you know, any other type of working interaction with district staff on the matter.
Could I hear a report? I referred to a motion on this issue?
I would move, let me get the wording. I would move approval of covenants between Cambria Community Service District, County of San Luis Obispo for preservation of repair and enhancement area, Main Street Bridge Replacement Project.
Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, and because we only have 4 members voting on this issue, perhaps a roll call vote would be in order. Madam Clerk?
Director Clift?
Yes.
Director Robinette?
Yes.
Director Rice?
No?
And President Thompson?
Aye.
3, 1, and 1 recused.
Motion passes. And again, could we also communicate with the Public Works Department of our request to have any reports that are made on this made available to the district?
And could I just say one other thing too? Certainly there has been some concern on the approach to the mitigation, and it would probably be appreciated if, as you start and you're moving along, if we might have some kind of update during the process.
Yeah, if I can respond, yes, absolutely. We can provide that to you probably on you know, just a text or email basis in the future. It is going to be some time before we really get to the mitigation work because we would be concentrating on the bridge efforts first before we really progress with the mitigation.
Oh, okay, I would kind of like to know, and I think some, certainly members here and from the public would like to know as you're getting started and kind of what your game plan is.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've had a request for a 5-minute recess. We'll make it 6 minutes, but let's get started right at 10 till. What is it?
Via phone, the one that was supposed to show did not show, so.
All right, we are back in session. Director Robinette is
Getting coffee?
hurrying. Okay, let's move to item 8, hearings and appeals. Item 8A, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, President Thompson and board members. Item 8A is discussion and consideration to fix water and wastewater standby and availability charges as provided in Government Code 61124B, and consideration to adopt Resolution 13-2013, fixing water and wastewater standby availability charges for fiscal year 2013 and 2014. Excuse me. The discussion is attached to the financial report and proposed resolution, number 13-2013, for receive and adoption after a public hearing is held. Resolution 13-2013 establishes the water and wastewater standby or availability charges for fiscal year 2013-2014 and directs staff to notify the affecting property owners. Final adoption of the charges will take place after a public notice hearing on May 23rd, 2013. The standby availability charges under fiscal impact for estimated revenue for 2012 and 2013. Water is 175, and wastewater is 111,000. I have one question for District Council real quick. There's a typo in your fiscal impact. Estimated revenue, it says 2012, 2013. The estimated revenue for fiscal year 2012, 2013 should read 2013, 2014. That's what we're asking you to approve. So there's a correction on that. And the recommendations are for the board, so with that, I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions, and this is a public hearing.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing on this item. I did not receive any requests to speak on it. And if we don't receive any requests to speak, then we will close the public hearing. Discussion from the board?
I move that we adopt Resolution 13-2013, establishing water and wastewater standby availability charges for fiscal year 13-14.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Moving now to agenda item 9A. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, President Thompson and board members. Agenda item 9A is discussion and consideration to adopt a memorandum of understanding between the Cambria Community Services District and the Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve regarding donations and merchandise sale on the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve. The genesis of this is originally the concept was to have collection tubes, if you will, similar to what they have up at the Elephant Seal Park, to be able to raise some additional revenue for the Fiscalini Ranch. The process was originally discussed at the FFRP Board of Directors, and the draft of the memorandum of understanding was brought to them. It was agreed upon, and then it was brought to PROS, and PROS, in theory or in concept, I believe, accepted it, and District Council has reviewed it, and now it is in front of you for consideration. There's a couple caveats that I wanted to discuss briefly, and one of them is that we want to make sure that the money that is raised out there goes directly back into the ranch, that it's not put into an endowment, if you will, and so it'll help fund some of the very things that were discussed earlier by Director Robinette about the maintenance on the ranch. Director Robinette also touched on the partnership that we have right now with FFRP and how we all work together very closely, FFRP and PROS and the board, CCSD board. The other caveat that I added to this is I wanted to make sure that any funds that were collected out there they're also included as part of our annual audit. I thought that was important because this very easily could wind up being a windfall for the ranch, which is a good thing. Historically, collection tubes, if you will, can raise quite a bit of money, and we're hopeful that that's what this will do. This has been about a 6-month process. We started the conversation a while back, and then this is the end result. So, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Just one question on the, because the question was raised of me. The tables and so forth will be set at the beginning or at the entrance and not necessarily inside the preserve, or how will that be set up? I mean,
if I could, President Thompson, since I missed the last PROS meeting, I was on vacation, I would defer to Director Robinette because she was there, and the details of that I'm not exactly sure on, but it is my understanding they would be right inside the gate.
That is also my understanding, because otherwise they become part of an obstacle, for parking and this and that. So they would actually be on the ranch property as you come in. And that's with volunteers that would be there available to give out brochures, information. They could sell some of the ball caps, the T-shirts, that type of thing. And then, so that would be just on the weekends and just on the north and south end of the Bluff Trail.
and I understand the MOU also requires that that they be in a passive type of
Yes.
situation where they're not going to accost people walking on the ranch to sell them merchandise. But
this was exactly my comment in my notes here. There will be no one accosting anyone else when they come on the ranch. We want to maintain the harmony and the welcoming feel of the ranch, but it will be that when people have questions, it'll be nice to have some people there that are knowledgeable that can answer. But there will be no soliciting the sales, kind of high-pressure stuff, or making people feel funny when they walk past, just to get onto the ranch. And they're very, in fact, I would say that Joe Allen, the executive director, and PROS, and the FERT board, too, were all very, very sensitive to that while this may be an opportunity and it will be funds raised to go back into the operation of the ranch again, that they didn't want to change anything that would have a negative impact on people that visit the ranch.
Director Clift?
On page 80 on number 3, it says FFRP will seek necessary approvals of CCSD for any planned activity. FFRP may plan and carry out fundraising activities at ranch with the agreement of the ranch manager, CCSD general manager, or CCS board of directors. I would like to add the word ranch agreement of either the ranch manager, the general manager, or the CCS board, because this gives kind of the, unless you want the ranch manager and the general manager to approve it, and I don't think you want that. So it's just a word of clarification. I put the word either or either, or however you want to pronounce it, between the words of and the, just so that clarifies that the ranch manager can approve it, general manager can approve it, or the board of directors can approve it.
Okay.
If I could, I agree that either would be fine, but I also take this to be those activities on the ranch that we've talked about before, when someone wants to have like, what have we had on the ranch before? A wedding. Sometimes the public will want to use the ranch for a particular thing, and so we now have, in fact, a very clearly concise, spelled out usage for activities on the ranch.
But that's not under this. This is just for the sale of,
Right, so this is not all of FERP's planned activities.
right. This is
Yes.
just for this item.
Okay.
Correct.
Director Rice?
I understand FFRP needs funding, and I would support having those donation tubes, but I think when you add a table or a kiosk or something where you're going to be selling baseball caps and whatever, it then starts to feel like that donation tube is like an entrance fee, and maybe doesn't present the best face for what is essentially supposed to be kept as nothing built on this thing, natural preserve that shows what this community was like before there were any houses. That's a beautiful area. Just me personally, it would make me feel like it was more of an entrance fee to give a donation, whereas if you only have the donation tubes there, it feels a little more voluntary. It feels a little less commercial pressure-y to me. I mean, I don't know if how the rest of the board feels, and I definitely wouldn't want to limit the FFRP from being able to make money, but the sale of merchandise the merchandising of it concerns me. That's all.
Director, can we have Director Barton?
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. I agree with you, Director Rice, but I know the spirit and intent of the FFRP is not to do that. I think it's only an opening for a special event of some kind. It's not they're going to be patrolling there or be there on a regular basis, and I think they can judge very well. I don't think approving this is going to have an additional incentive for them to be there. I think the idea of having the tube is a good one, and I think they deserve it.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add on that, the tube is apart from where this table is, and it's there all the time. So, that's when people pass that, if they feel compelled, they can. And I think that the table, again, has informational material too. And if someone's interested in anything that happens to be there for sale, they could get it if they wanted to.
I was just going to suggest that maybe having something near where you get the doggy bags might not be a bad idea. I know when I take a doggy bag, I sure would probably stick $1 in there because I appreciate having that available for me when I walk my dogs.
On the donation tube, yes, I think that would be a very good location.
Okay, we have 2 requests to speak on this item that came in after we began our discussion. So first one is Jerry McKinnon.
So you're reopening the public hearing.
We didn't have a public hearing on this.
I thought you had a public hearing, opened and closed it.
No, that was a...
Oh, that was the other one. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Go.
I knew there was a reason for coming to the meeting. This is Jerry McKinnon, a resident of Cambria. The memorandum of understanding refers to the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve. Years ago, and also it talks about access to the historic public access, maintaining historic public access. That would suggest to me that we're setting aside the idea that once upon a time there was an East Ranch and a West Ranch. This seems to address doing things on what used to be called the West Ranch. Now it's making reference to the whole Fiscalini Ranch. That means to me that historically speaking, below the Rabobank used to be a brickyard. Way back in the 40s and the 30s, it was a brickyard. So public access to a historic site would mean that we can use that driveway at the bottom of the Rabobank parking lot to get into what will someday become the Cambria Yacht Club. I appreciate the opportunity for us to raise funds to develop that yacht club, because the way this is worded, it only makes reference to having tables at the entrance to east and west ends of the West Ranch. So thank you for letting me continue the development of the ranch, unless you want to include the words West Ranch and exclude. And by the way, I'd like to know who it is that's responsible for this East Ranch. Some organization in town not allows anyone to cut the weeds. We're letting it have its natural habitat for some reason or another, while we keep the other ranch all nice and clean and pristine. So that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. Next, we have Jeff Howman.
This is probably not the most important issue ever facing the CCSD, but I would like to say that this ranch is the crown jewel. It's sacrosanct. Is that the right word? Sacrosanct. And I think even though the intentions are good, of doing the fundraising there, I would say leave it alone. Keep the commercialism off it. Just let it be, this untouched, natural preserve that people go to see, and not to be hustled to make donations and all of that. I mean, why not do the donations in this room, or put it by Rabobank? But the ranch itself should be what it was intended to be, left alone, just to be visited, so that you have a natural, unaffected, unsliced, diced, commercialized. I think you cheapen the place when you start doing the, fundraising on the ranch itself. The whole town, I mean, every merchant in town would carry the T-shirts and make a donation to the ranch. There's many, many other vehicles that aren't like sort of a cheap, sleazy way of trying to raise funds for the ranch. So I would hope you guys would just keep the ranch pure. Don't start contaminating it with commercialism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howman. Back to the board for discussion, action.
Well, I definitely support the donation tubes, but I tend to agree with what Jeff said about the commercialism. There's other avenues for selling merchandise, and having merchandise as part of this MOU is, I understand the FFRP needs the money, and I fully support what all the work that they do, and there's so many volunteers in this town that work for that nonprofit. I don't want to limit them, but it does bother me, the merchandise, when it could be around town. That's all.
Are we ready for a motion then?
Yes.
Comments?
Unless you want to discuss it more.
Any more discussion?
Well, I'm beginning to be moved by Director Rice's comments. You would favor some form of a passive donation, like the state parks for motorhomes. They have like a pipe there, and you drop your fee in there.
Absolutely.
And it's a steel pipe, and somebody's got a lock on the thing, but it's just a pipe, and it doesn't take much space as compared to a table selling.
Possibly, it's possibly extending to every weekend is what the MOU says. I mean, I definitely think the donation tubes are an essential and useful idea, and definitely if we were to vote on it the way that it is right now, I would reluctantly vote yes, because I don't want the FFRP to lose the possibility of having that kind of funding, but the merchandising really bothers me.
Yeah, well, you know, I understand what everyone is saying, too. I have to say, though, having been in business for some 10 years and having also been involved with FFRP on a kitchen tour and seeing how much effort goes into raising the dollars that they need to keep doing what they do, and then also seeing the volunteers out there picking weeds and getting rid of the invasive vegetation. There's just so much sweat and energy that goes into their maintaining the property. I think that if we could help them to do the work that they do for nothing, I mean, they're not paid, they're volunteers. I think we should do what we can to make it easier for them to raise their funds.
What is the profit margin on T-shirts and hats, though? I mean, it's not, I mean, that part isn't the majority. I would think that part wouldn't be the majority of the income that they would get from something like that.
I guess I would only say, again, and I think I agree with what we're all kind of sharing here today. It's kind of a quandary. But I guess the one thing, and where people show concern, having sat in on all these conversations that have taken place with FERP and then with PROS, the real adamant clarity is that this is not going to be that somebody's pressuring somebody. These people that are going to be the volunteers are going to be the first job they have where they just ask them to sit.
What if we made it a one-year agreement? And then we would have to then, go on from that point on into this. I know it's got this annual review and compliance, but if it was just a flat one-year agreement, we would have the ability, if it gets out of hand, it would just go away. If it's not out of hand and we looked at it.
I appreciate that, Director Clift. In Section 2, Article 3, it says FFRP will seek necessary approvals of CCSD for any planned activities, and FFRP may plan and carry out fundraising activities on the ranch with the agreement of the ranch manager, CCSD general manager, or, it says or, CCS board of directors. So I think as of now, we would have the authority to direct them otherwise. And I agree that if it has an annual review, I say let it go for this year until this time next year and see how it works.
Could the verbiage we have in here now regarding an annual review suffice? If we clarified here, could we do this today to say we really would like the review to include is what they had in mind, where that people are not feeling offended, certainly, and still feel just as welcome as always, to make sure that that is absolutely the result. Maybe like a one-year kind of pilot.
Mr. Hirsch?
I think it might be preferable to be clear if that's the intent of the board, and simply add a new paragraph number 10 that more clearly said that the term of this agreement shall be for 1 year, rather than get into an ambiguity like that.
Okay, so
I agree with that provision.
yeah, could we include that provision?
Certainly the board can, and that's subject then to FFRP's accepting it and signing the agreement.
Okay, so at this time, what would we be able to do? Just ask to include that, and then it goes back to FERP and back to PROS?
I think the motion would be to approve the agreement with that change and the change that Board Member Clift had made, adding the word either to paragraph 3.
Right.
Okay. Then I would like to move that we want to adopt this memorandum of understanding between the Cambria Community Service District and the Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve regarding the donations and merchandise sale on the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve, that will include then adding the word either in section blah, blah.
Section
Thank you. And that during this first year, at the end of the first year, there would be then brought back to the board a review.
And again, that would be adding paragraph 10 that said, the term of this agreement shall be for 1 year.
Okay, and so we would renew it next year depending on how it's gone. Okay, that's my motion.
I second that motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. That is approved. Thank you. Moving to 9B, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, President Thompson, board members. Item 9B is discussion and consideration of Army Corps of Engineers update on the EIR-EIS process and the water supply alternatives, and receive Army Corps of Engineers quarterly report. I'll turn this over to Bob Greshens. He has a PowerPoint presentation, and it's my understanding that we have an Army Corps of Engineers representative via the web that we can talk to. And we were supposed to have somebody here from the Army Corps, but due to sickness, they were unable to make it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bob Greshens, our district engineer.
Thank you, Jerry, and members of the board. I'm going to stand up at the podium here because I have a slideshow here that covers the staff report. I'm not sure the range of this thing, so excuse me for just 1 minute. And before I get going here, I'd like to check with our cyberspace connection here to see who may be out there. I haven't had a chance with the meeting link to communicate recently with the staff from the Army Corps. So could you please introduce yourselves if you are standing by?
Yeah, hi Bob. This is Debbie Lamb. I'm a landscape architect with the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm the environmental coordinator overseeing the production from our end of what the Chambers Liquor Group is doing for producing EIS, EIR.
Great.
And Kathy Anderson, I'm the project manager.
Oh, they,
for the
Kathy,
Army
you are.
Corps of Engineers. Yes, I'm on.
Okay.
I'm in a different office. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And anyone else?
And I think Lisa Louie was on the phone.
Okay, and Lisa.
Do you also have Jody Clifford with you, Debbie?
No, she's in another meeting. And
Okay.
Tom was here, and I don't know where he went off to. He was on the phone.
Okay, well, we'll assume that you two are there unless we hear from someone else then. Thank you very much for standing by. As you can tell, we're trying to be pretty frugal with the Army Corps' budget, and we're using our WebEx connection to be able to avoid the travel time and so forth with them being here in person as well. And plus, one person did become ill that we thought would be traveling through the area and could make this meeting, but unfortunately that didn't work. So I have a PowerPoint presentation that I pulled together, and with the assistance of the key Corps experts, I'll turn a few of those slides over to them to help them explain some of the details behind them. But essentially what happened here is Jerry and I we were having a discussion with the Corps back in March, and we had learned that there's been some change to the alternatives that are going through the detailed analysis, and the Corps has their specific reasons for that, and we'll get into that later in this presentation. And I just wanted to keep you advised of that, as well as the schedule and the project budget. So there's three basic areas we're going to cover in this presentation. So essentially the outline today is the alternatives being analyzed, and again, this is in the EIR, EIS, a little background on how these alternatives came about, and I'll go quickly on that. I know you want to be brief as possible here. A summary of the technical screening and workshops that we did earlier last year, a brief touch on the federal NEPA compliance requirements and why there has been some change to what you've seen earlier for that reason. The alternatives, just summing up the alternatives that are currently undergoing detailed EIR, EIS analysis, the schedule, and then the quarterly financial report. You should have, besides the staff report, there is a green addendum sheet that was on the table outside, and that's the latest quarterly staff report, which was not part of the agenda packet that went out last week. Oops, going too fast here. Okay. Just a background on the alternatives. This project has had a very long history with the CCSD, further than when the Corps was even involved at first. In the 1999 to 2000 era, there was a value engineering project done on an earlier 1990s era project, and that had recommended a horizontal intake offshore from the San Simeon Creek beach area. And then in 2005 to 2007, there were efforts to help try to define what that subterranean strata was in that area, and that failed because of a permit appeal at the Coastal Commission, which was upheld. There was concerns about species like snowy plovers and plovers out there, and other reasons cited at that time. From about the 2001 to 2006 period is when the project cooperation agreement was developed, and some of the initial funding occurred and approvals with the Army Corps that resulted in the federal WRDA funding and the funding for a seawater desalination project at that time. And from about in 2008, the CCSD adopted a programmatic EIR on the Water Master Plan, and it in turn recommends seawater desalination with the thought that a detailed project level EIR would follow that would reference and tier off that program EIR. And that's essentially what we're trying to do, is finish a project level environmental clearance, but now it's an EIS EIR because of the federal involvement. From 2007 to 2010, this was a fairly significant issue that I think Jim Webb actually touched on earlier in some of his comment, but there was a Cambria Marine Park formed, and then 2010 was when the state parks adopted that, as Jim mentioned earlier. 2009, there was a geophysical study that we had completed locally that confirmed the existence of a paleo channel underneath the Santa Rosa Creek beach area. And then in 2011, we were trying to obtain permits to help define that subterranean strata, and those permits never were finalized, so that effort stalled out and failed. In 2012, as you probably recall, we had a series of workshops, and that was on additional alternatives that were developed by the Army Corps technical team. So we had a pretty heavy involvement with what we're referring to as the technical team, and looking at concepts and ways to address some of these issues that occurred in the past. And that was the result of the workshops that you all had attended back then. As you recall, we had 4 technical team facilitated workshops on the different concepts. We had the first one on June 14th, where again we talked about what type of evaluation criteria to apply. In the workshop 2 in July, it was the Criterion Decision Plus model was presented by CDM at the time. Again, we had another workshop on August 9th showing some of the rankings. Workshop 4 was pretty much the culmination of the effort to make a decision on the alternatives, and at that time the direction was to look at the surface water storage on ranch land north of San Simeon Creek Road, the San Simeon CSD wastewater as a means to augment the supply for a future recycled water project. And that was in addition to some of the direction provided at the earlier workshop, which was the brackish water alternative on CCSD property south of San Simeon Creek Road, as well as looking at surface water storage at the Whale Rock Reservoir for seasonal storage. There was a change made outside of these workshops in November 15th at the regular board meeting when we presented more information that the future supply from the San Simeon alternative wasn't going to be that great, so that alternative then was dropped from the detailed analysis list at that point in time. Again, this is just a summary of all the projects from the, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on this, but these were the ones that survived what we call the Tier 2 analysis, and that was the cost estimate presented on the September 18th workshop last year. The ranking of the alternatives, again, the longer the line with all those different colored blocks for the criteria, the better it was ranked by that criterion decision plus evaluation. And those are attached to the staff report as well. We looked at it a couple of ways, and each time the top 4 or 5 tended to be the San Simeon Brackish, Whale Rock, the Shamel Park desal, and Morro Bay shared facility. The NEPA requirements, and again, if Linda or Kathy want to speak to this, they're welcome to, but I just borrowed a few slides from the core staff here, and the analysis of the agency's alternatives, including proposed, are the heart of the environmental impact statement. It's right out of what the Corps has to comply with as being a federal agency. And there's also a difference between what our district normally complies with CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, but NEPA is different in regards to how thorough and rigorous the alternatives have to be evaluated. And that's what the second bullet point gets to, is we have to rigorously explore and objectively evaluate all reasonable alternatives. So that's a fairly substantial point. Next slide. We have, and again, this is going to come out in the draft EIR, EIS, but you have to discuss all the factors, and the emphasis on all factors essential to the agency's decision, and discuss how they influence the agency's decision. Reasonable alternatives include those that are practical or feasible from the technical and economic standpoint, using common sense rather than simply a desirable type of alternative from the standpoint of solely of the applicant. And then the result is an array of alternatives that can be more inclusive than the alternatives, and that brackets all reasonable alternatives. That's essentially the ground rules that the Army Corps is following on the EIR, EIS, and that's why there have been some changes since that workshop in September, because they have been conferring with their special counsel and so forth to make sure they're complying with NEPA. And finally, so as a result of those discussions they've had, we learned in March that the alternatives that are now being studied in detail in the EIR, EIS process include the brackish water desal, which we knew was in there, the Whale Rock seasonal storage, but now the subterranean seawater desal, which was the horizontal wells originated from the Shamel Park area, being subterranean, and then an inland treatment facility next to the wastewater treatment plant. And then the last one they're studying in detail is the shared desalination facility with Morro Bay. The process they're following, this was from an earlier presentation, they are on the second line down in IDing the problems with existing conditions. They're roughly in this area. I have a real busy chart that comes up next that you won't be able to read at this scale, but it is attached to your staff report and again, it's pretty small font, but I just highlighted a couple of key points on that. Oops, I must have gone too fast. Oh. Okay. Basically, this is a markup of the schedule that's in your packet. And the two areas I just wanted to point out, this is where we are today. And you can just kind of gauge where we are in the overall schedule. There's many, many steps that the Army Corps goes through as far as its evaluation and checks and cross-checks as this thing wraps up. The key point here, the 45-day public review period for the draft is now estimated about January 10th of 2014. And I believe, and Debbie and Kathy could maybe help me out on this, but I think the rationale or the reason this thing got pushed back was the workshops that occurred. And I know I had reported an earlier date to you in the past. I think I was estimating around May of this year. So there's a difference there significantly from what's been reported in the past. And then lastly, we have a draft quarterly report, and that's the green sheet. Again, Kathy is available to answer the details on this. The bottom line that we're most concerned about is the the remaining funds available to obligate, and it shows they have about 8,000 in federal and 38,000 left of the 166,000 that the district had provided some time ago. So they have about 46,000 left to manage these contracts that are ongoing. So that's not a whole lot of money. They've been being very frugal in watching their budget. Again, they didn't travel up here for this meeting, for this presentation. So with that said, you know, we'd be glad to answer questions you might have. And we have Kathy and Debbie online to, they are the experts on some of this information, so I might have to defer to them. Thank you.
Okay, before we get into that, we have a couple requests to speak from the public. First one, Lynn Harkins. Ms. Harkins? Pardon, ma'am? Could you speak into the microphone, Martha? Thank you.
That one?
There we go.
I'm sure that wasn't by design, Mr. Greshams. You wouldn't turn the microphone off on me, would you? Okay. So, yeah, the cost per acre foot for San Simeon Offs, that seems high. Can you tell me why that ended up coming up so high?
Could you ask all your questions, Ms. Harkins, and we'll ask for responses.
Okay, then that's the San Simeon Stream off-stream storage. I'd just like to know what became prohibitive about that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Greshams, could you explain?
Okay, sure. That came up, I think, in one of the workshop, or maybe a couple of the workshop meetings earlier back in 2012. And as I recall, it was the Savanetich, the engineer with CDM, explained that the dams were very high because of the steep terrain that was involved in that area. So that required quite a bit of earthwork to get the level of storage needed because of the steep terrain. And that, I know that was a contributing factor to it. So they had looked at that in the past, and I know I had them check themselves on that particular item before, but that was the gist of the response that we had back then when CDM was doing that analysis.
When they removed that from the list of our priorities, did they advise anybody, or they just whacked it?
I think the Corps was looking at the price of that, as well as some of the environmental issues that came up early in their analysis phase that they're in right now, and that's why they felt that was going to screen out early in the process and not spend the budget on the detailed analysis. So, Debbie, is that, am I accurately addressing your thoughts from your end on that one?
Yeah, Tom's here too. What was the question, Bob?
Okay, the public comment was, why was there such a high cost on the surface storage on the ranch land north of San Simeon Creek Road? And I had explained that during the earlier workshop back in 2012, the steep terrain was cited and the fact that they were very tall and large dams to get that storage volume, and that was part of the reason for the high cost. And then we went from there to talk about why was it not carried forward in a detailed analysis, and I thought there may have been the practical cost reason as well as some environmental issues that caused you to screen that out at this point and not proceed with a detailed analysis on that one. So if you could explain your rationale, but that's my recollection.
So this is the one up in San Simeon?
Yes, this was on the ranch property north and of San Simeon Creek Road.
Well, the two of the issues are we have critical habitat for steelhead, and we also have critical habitat for red-legged frog. And then there's probably, I think there's several listed plant species that would cause issues in the consultation process. I mean, we would have to try to avoid take of steelhead, we'd have to try to avoid take of the red-legged frog, or we would have to try to minimize the effect, which means that there's going to be some kind of habitat that would have to be restored or replaced elsewhere within the same watershed.
So you saw some very significant issues with Endangered Species Act compliance, in so many words.
Yes.
As well as
And
the cost.
As well as the cost, yeah.
So, but that still
I
was
have
a-
that on an
there was
earlier
still
slide.
an
Let me
analysis of
pull that. If you want to know the cost, I can go back up there, but let me see if I can reach it from here. Jesse, you want to back that up to the cost slide here? See, I might be able to. Here, it's probably the slide number 5. There you go. So this was from the September 18th, 2012, and they had revised their cost for the 250 acre-foot size at that time, and the let's see,
Who revised the cost,
up in
Bob?
the it was CDM that was working on their contract with the Corps, but it was a $65 million cost estimate back at that time for that particular alternative.
Yeah, that would be a CDM cost, and CDM would have to answer that question.
Yeah.
We didn't really play much into that cost.
Right, and just so everyone knows, we've kind of shifted the emphasis here from the technical team over to the environmental team. So we don't have the technical team represented other than my link to their past communication. So that was done at the workshop level.
But that's true, Bob. The considerations were the high costs and then also the expected environmental impacts. But all of that analysis will be detailed in the EIS, and as part of that process,
Yes.
everything, each alternative is considered, and the history of the decision process and determination of the an alternative is described in the EIS, and the rationale is provided. So far in arriving at the shorter list of alternatives that will go into more detailed examination in the EIS, this one is one that the cost was very high, prohibitive, and the environmental impacts kind of ruled that out of the short four alternative list.
Okay, let's.
I think the big.
But then that.
Oh, I think that answers the question. I think we have another public comment that came in, so I'm going to step aside and we'll hear that comment next. Thank you.
We have 2 more public comments to hear from. Let's do that. Jim Webb, then Mary Webb.
My name is Jim Webb, Cambria resident. I had a couple of questions after reading over the PowerPoint that Bob presented. My first question has to do with just a simple matter of understanding the alternative on page 3 of the PowerPoint. When we look at Tier 2 water supply alternative number 5, I was wondering if Bob or someone on the internet could explain the 182 acre-foot Warren proviso to the San Simeon Creek brackish desal plant. I'd like to understand exactly what that means. I understand we have an agreement with Mr. Warren to supply a certain number of acre-feet a year of water. And I see his name here, so I figure that somehow that's either going to be replaced with non-potable water, or that's going to be handled in some other way. And I'd just like somebody to explain what is envisioned, since if you're looking at a 250-acre project, 182 of it is being discussed regarding the Warren agreement, and I think it'd be important to understand that. The other question I had was under the NEPA requirement on page 5, the second bullet point. I just wondered where the emphasis came from. Was that part of the original language, or did someone add the emphasis about rather than simply being desirable from the standpoint of the applicant? And of course, it's disturbing to find that analysis has been done in private, behind closed doors, and has affected the outcome of the alternatives. But that, I think, probably should be discussed at another meeting as opposed to this. I'd like to point out that the application of common sense to an analysis is a subject for a tremendous amount of debate. And I think somebody could easily debate that common sense would tell you a pipeline all the way to Morro Bay is somewhat, I just don't even think it's credible in comparison to the alternatives that were locally envisioned and described. So I would like to know what application of common sense tells you that that pipeline project to a desal plant that doesn't run is somehow more cost-effective or environmentally sound than looking at off-stream storage up San Simeon Creek. And then finally, in mentioning the environmental impact of off-stream storage and why it was removed, they mentioned a consideration of impacts to steelhead, red-legged frog, and listed plant species. And I would just note that virtually every alternative that remains, especially those involving desal, have exactly the same impacts on exactly the same species. So I don't understand how the sword cuts on one hand but doesn't cut on the other hand. So with that, I'll leave it. Thank you.
Would you like me to respond? Okay.
Please, yeah. Mary, do you want to comment? You want to comment now, or wait until? Okay.
President Thompson, can we have the Army Corps answer the questions?
I can answer the first one and maybe defer to Army Corps staff on some of the details.
Yeah, because that's why we have them on the phone.
Yeah.
I think it's important that the Army Corps answers some of these questions and not CCSD staff all the time.
I can answer the first one, which I think is a pretty straightforward one, and it's I recognize it as engineer speak. Your first question, and that's something we should have caught and clarified in a footnote, but the number 5 on that particular chart that's up there, where it says San Simeon Creek Road brackish desal dash 182 acre feet without treatment. That was CDM's a way of mentioning that they weren't sizing the treatment facility for the Warren obligation when they came up with that cost estimate. So it was a detail that came out of an engineer's mind as he was writing this description, trying to qualify the cost estimate. So there is a 182 acre foot per year commitment in the Warren agreement, but it doesn't have to go through a treatment plant. And that has to be considered as that project would go forward in design as far as how the piping would be laid out and how the pumps and so forth are laid out. So again, I think it's more engineering speak, and that's probably what was confusing about that particular descriptor. Then I'll have to refer to, I think, Tom or maybe Debbie on the question on the NEPA slide being underlined. Again, I was borrowing some of these slides from an Army Corps presentation, so I don't know, where the emphasis came up on that particular one. And then as far as the other comment on the Morro Bay feasibility and so forth, that is part of the analysis they're going through. And I don't, again, I'll defer to the Army Corps environmental team because they are the experts on it. So thank you.
Now, this is Thomas Keeney, the senior ecologist. I can answer to the Morro Bay issue question, and that is it is an alternative that is very probable. In that, from the ecological perspective, we don't have the issues with steelhead, we don't have issues with black abalone, sea otters, red-legged frogs, and everything else that gets in the way. From the ecological perspective, the intake pipes, the discharge pipes are all in, the infrastructure is there. So from that perspective, it's a very probable alternative that needs to go through further analysis, not only with the NEPA process, but has to go through analysis. We have to look at it from an analytical point of view for the Section 7 consultation with National Fisheries Service and with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. From the NEPA perspective, we look at an array of alternatives, and piping water 25 miles up a road is similar to whether they're going to pipe oil from the North Alaska down to Prado Bay. I mean, it's a pipeline, and where is it going to go through? So one of the issues is trying to reduce the effects of a project on the environment, and so it's a valid alternative. But that's not to say that alternative will be the preferred alternative. We don't know that yet until Chambers goes through the entire analytical process. As far as the question on salmon about the reservoir, it was called the offsite reservoir. Yeah, you're correct. It does have salmonoids. It does have red-legged frogs and other alternatives. The bigger issue here is actually taking away a larger parcel of land that then has to be mitigated for and purchased elsewhere. And I'm assuming that when CDM came up with these costs, that's a major cost. Added to the fact that, yes, salmonoids and red-legged frogs would have to be dealt with also. I think this offsite reservoir has more of an effect on salmonoids and red-legged frogs because you're permanently taking away the habitat. So as opposed to some of the other alternatives. So it can be a much more damaging alternative environmentally. It can be a much more costly alternative economically. As far as the NEPA emphasis, Jody Clifford, our branch chief, is the one that put this together. I'm not sure why she underlined it, other than what it says, rather than simply being desirable from the standpoint of the applicant. I think what she's trying to say here, or trying to say, is that we're looking at the array of alternatives. We know that the applicant or the local sponsor is looking at an alternative that they've gone through, but NEPA has to go through an array of alternatives because that's what it calls for. So we can look at alternatives from Morro Bay up to San Simeon and everything in between. So we've tried to weed out the alternatives that we know definitely that would not work, such as the open ocean intake. We know that the Coast Commission, we know that that's not going to even come close to the environmental, looking at the environmental impacts and getting through the regulatory process. So something like the open ocean intake would leave the arena quickly. Something like Estero Bay, which was very similar to Morro Bay, it already has infrastructure in place except for the on-land infrastructure. So again, we could pick one or the other, but that still will go through the analytical process. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, Tom, I think you might have been referring to San Simeon Creek when you said San Luis Creek, I think, just to clarify, I think, on when you're talking about. Okay, yeah. All right.
Okay,
Make sure we had that.
I'd like to have the other public comment, then bring it back to the board. So Mary, if you're ready.
Mary Webb, Vice President of Green Space, which I probably should have put on my form there too. My comment would be that NEPA and CEQA, there are lots of ways to do, and it's required to do coordination when you're doing NEPA with CEQA. And when you do a coordinated effort, you could completely eliminate subterranean seawater desalination with horizontal wells originating from Schammel Park with an inland facility next to Cambria wastewater treatment plant, because the California Coastal Commission has already denied that. So that option has been, there was vocal, strong opposition within the community. Obviously, we've gone through at least a 6 to 8 year process with seawater desalination, and it's not going to fly. So to have that just pop up now at this meeting is really disappointing, and Green Space would absolutely not go for it. Shared desalination with the city of Morro Bay is absolutely ridiculous and off the table, because Morro Bay's desalination facilities does not work, and it does not provide enough water to provide water for Cambria, and it would be way more costly than off-stream storage. I don't accept the premise for off-stream storage and the costs, whether CDM came up with it or the Army Corps. And for the record, as was stated at most of those workshops, the community did not appreciate the way the workshops were being conducted, and do not agree with most of the premises that were made during those workshops, including cost basis. No analysis was done of those costs. No analysis was done of the projects that were chosen. No analysis was really done of the projects that were taken off the table. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Okay.
Hey, Bob? Bob, this is Tom.
Yes, you can direct your question to our board president, Tom.
Okay,
Mr.
Jerry,
Director
this is
Thompson.
Thomas Keeney. In response to the comment, the Coast Commission did not vote to eliminate desalination at Schammel Park. What they did is they voted to not allow the geotechnical investigation to go forward below mean high tide. If they remember, the Coast Commission did allow geotechnical investigation to go forward above mean high tide at Schammel Park, in which we did implement. As far as Morro Bay is concerned, it's an analysis that has to be looked at in the alternatives. It's the alternative analysis in NEPA that has to go forward, not just because somebody may not want it. It's part of that process of disclosure, and it could fall out. We don't know that yet. Some folks are talking about common sense, but we just can't eliminate it. And when we meet with all the resource agencies, they could easily say, well, they think that that's the alternative that should be going forward, because it has the least damaging environmental effect on the marine life. So that's what we're dealing with, and that's why we go through this long environmental analysis. So we're not done yet. We're still going through the analytical process.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mary, you had 30 seconds left on your clock.
I'm sorry, there's one thing that I forgot, and that is that there's no way that this should take until January of 2014 to analyze these alternatives. Subterranean seawater desalination with a horizontal well drilling has been analyzed. They can just take all the information that's already been done and just apply it to moving it further up Santa Rosa Creek, which would absolutely not work. And shared desalination, to analyze that, I think anybody can look and read in the paper at this point that that's absolutely not going to work. There is just no way that this should be taking another 7, 8 months to come up with this analysis. We should be having this within about 45 days. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, board, I'm going to bring this back to the board for your comments and discussion. I would urge brevity in our comments and discussion, because I have a need to be here for Mr. Doyle's memorial, and I think others would like to also. So please, can we move it quickly? Who is first, Mr. Director Clift?
I just have a couple of questions of the Army Corps of Engineers. What, in your estimation, is the likelihood that you can produce an environmental document by 1/10/2014? 2014? I'd like to specifically know, can you do that?
Kathy? Do you have the schedule? Yes.
Yeah, I need to pull up the schedule. The schedule, yeah.
The schedule shows the ROD being signed by September 2014.
Right.
By
And we are
September.
required, end of September
Well, let's
2014.
back up.
Signature of the ROD.
Whoa. One question at a time. Can you produce an environmental document by 1/10/14?
If I may clarify for their sake too in answering your question, that's the start of the 45-day review period of the
Yeah,
draft.
but you can't start the
EIR, yes.
45-day period until you have a document,
Right,
right?
and I just want to clarify that that's the point that you're raising on the schedule, which was the markup I had added. Yes.
Yes, and according to the current schedule, we have the draft EIR completed by January 2014.
I know that's your current schedule. I'm asking you, what is the likelihood that you will ever make your current schedule? You've not made one date today. What is your promise that you will produce something by that date?
That's not fair. They had 4 workshops that delayed us.
Yeah, and those 4 workshops were a waste of time because you chose something else that wasn't on those workshops. That's an 8-month waste of time on your part.
And we told the CCSD when they went into the workshops that whatever alternatives that they came up with, other alternatives could be coming back in from the NEPA perspective. That was stated before the workshops even started.
I'm still asking the question. What is give me a percentage. 50% you can hit the 1/14 period.
Okay, the contract that the Corps has with Chambers Group, who's producing the document, is based on the schedule and their payment. They won't get paid if they don't finish the document as scheduled that we have with them. That's part of the contract. The schedule right now shows that we will have a draft for our internal review sometime in late August. We have to go through what's called an external review, which is called an agency technical review, where we have to send the document to another district or throughout the country, somewhere in the country, who will review this and comment on it before we can send it up for a public review. That's our review process now. And these things have been added into the schedule overall that were not added in when this project was first started. Therefore, we have now made the schedule more realistic in terms of what it's going to take so that everybody can see that we have to go through our Office of Council review. We have to go through what's called agency technical review process before we can go out for public review.
So you can't give me even a 5% potential that'll be done by that date?
It'll be much higher than that. I would say it has to be upward of 80, 90%, because we are also, and the other caveat with this is that the funding for this contract is from the ARA, American Rehabilitation Recovery Act funds, which expire. So we have to absolutely get this completed by the end of fiscal year 2014.
Okay, I'll figure.
We are on track to do that.
I'll figure that you're saying we have an 80 to 90% chance of having that document by that date. That's fine.
We're on track.
The second question is, do you have sufficient funds to administer the project during that period of time, or is there a likelihood that you would stop the project for the lack of funds or come to us for additional funds?
We are very low on funds. That's true. We were ready to talk about the quarterly report. But the bottom line on the quarterly report, it does show that we have $62,000 in sponsor funds available to us now. All of the funding, the majority of the funding that has been received on this project to date has been the ARA funds, which expired for labor, for use for labor at the end of 2012. So we are operating on the non-federal sponsor funds that we've received. We have 62,000 of those remaining. So we're trying to be very, very frugal. All we're using it for is the administration of the contract. The contract is fully funded and is and should complete with the amount of funds that is set aside for that contract.
Okay,
the
contract's
fund-
contract's fully funded. It's just a matter of whether you have
Yes.
enough money to administer the contract.
Oh, correct.
All right.
So, and our burn rate has been, we've been keeping it very minimal, up to $5,000 per month, which is very minimal.
Director Robinette?
With that, it will be tight, yes.
Okay, thank you. My questions and my comments could go on extensively, but I know time is a concern here today for everyone. But I need to start by saying, on behalf of the citizens of Cambria, I am clearly disappointed in, so far, the direction this has taken. I have to say, from my vantage point, it comes down to this. Ultimately, we've spent a lot of time, we've had people give their opinion, we've had public input, which, by the way, I thought was a welcome idea on your part, too. I didn't know that you were doing this and saying it was an 8-month delay because we wanted workshops. To me, we all work for the public, and it's a good idea to have input when you can get it. So that was the first thing. The next thing is, clearly for me, the way this is sounding and headed, I don't think it's prudent to consider alternatives that you, for whatever information you have, already know isn't going to work. It would seem to me from the ones that have been identified that you would, rather than going through that public input process, would have said, look, here's what you've got. Because now you're saying that you are giving us the 4 alternatives, 3 of them desal plants, and 1 with the whale rock. My question will be this. I really would like your expertise and guidance on this so that we would just know what our choices are. In light of, which do you think will cut the environmental muster with both the NEPA and CEQA here, or California's local environmental and national? Because if you have a good idea of this, since you work with this, I believe, quite a bit, we shouldn't be going down and looking at an alternative that you have a good sense is probably not going to be approved. So that would be one very key thing. The other key thing is, if we are looking at alternatives that you have given us to consider, I'm not sure if we're considering them or you're just waiting for us to pick the right one. But I would say this, that of these 4, 2 involve other agencies. Whale Rock involves San Luis Obispo, and Morro Bay involves Morro Bay. It is critical to me that someone has made contact with these 2 agencies to see, in the first place, the more obvious question. Are they even, did you go away? Are they even amenable to sharing resources? Because if they're not, then you don't need to talk about it any longer. So those are it is obviously a frustrating thing, and I do have to have confidence that you too want this to be a success. I believe that. But right now, after years and years and years, and then here we are with getting rather active with this over the last year and a half or whatever, it seems that we're back at square one. So that's, of course, of deep frustration.
Thank you, Director Robinette. Any other discussion? Director Rice?
But I would like some answers, if you don't mind.
Oh.
I had 2 questions here. Wouldn't it seem that you would want to give us alternatives that you believe would cut the environmental requirements or be approved in the first place? That's the first question. I think they did go home.
No. Did we lose Debbie and Tom?
We're here. Yeah, Tom is
okay. But This is Kathy Anderson. I just want to say that the process that the alternatives are going through right now, the alternative process, is looking at the environmental issues with each of the alternatives, and we can't presume that to a degree. I mean, it is going through that process. All of the alternatives that have been considered all along have to be documented, and the description of the thought process of considering them and ruling them out have to be considered. So that the EIS analysis process will step through all of that and explain all of that, and ultimately rule out the ones that do or don't make sense environmentally. And you mentioned also the acceptability alternative criteria. That is part of that analysis as well. But we can't presume that at this point up front. We need to go through the process in order to make it legal and in accordance to the NEPA. So, and then you mentioned also coordination with CEQA. That is also part of the analysis. We would not likely turn out with an alternative that would not be in accordance with the alternative that would be selected according to the CEQA process, which would be, the CCSD's alternative. So at the end of the road, they all come together. The analysis will be performed, and an alternative would come out of the wash, so to speak, that everyone can be satisfied with. And Debbie and Tom, do you want to add more to that as far as the...
Well, first of all, you have to... This is Debbie. Yeah. First of all, you have to understand that when we say environmental, we're not talking just about endangered species. We're talking about a lot of different resources that have to be analyzed and taken into consideration regarding human health, public safety, transportation, impacts of traffic during construction, post-construction, all kinds of things in terms of what it does to land use, what the impacts are to aesthetic resources, to sustainability, to climate change even. We have to address these issues. These things take time to discuss and analyze for each of these alternatives. These have to be documented as to what the impacts are on these particular resources. It's not done in a vacuum. They have to be done and see how they overlap. These things are done. I think areas are analyzed together for each alternative. You cannot eliminate an alternative just because you've got one endangered species. You have to look at all the alternatives on an equal basis.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is Jody. I just rejoined the call.
Yeah.
I just wanted to echo what Debbie said. NEPA and CEQA do have some differences, and NEPA does require kind of a full analysis of each of the alternatives to the same level of detail.
Yeah.
So that might be a disconnect. We understand that from a CEQA perspective, some of these alternatives that we're moving forward through the analysis do not meet with the goals and objectives of the CEQA document, and that can be displayed in the document that we're putting together.
Okay, so are you saying that you would then, are you saying that you would let us know then of the 4 you presented here for us that some of these wouldn't meet all of the requirements?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that question.
I'm sorry, just the last person who spoke, I thought I heard her say that some of the alternatives of the 4 you presented here for us again, that some of these would not meet with California's environmental process?
This is Jody again. I'm going to say that we understand that CEQA and NEPA are separate processes, and that they are, to a certain extent, responding to separate requirements. And certainly we understand that not all of the alternatives, perhaps in the EIS portion of the document, would meet the goals and objectives of the local agency. And that can be clearly defined. And it can also be clearly defined why we are bringing something forward. And it's a matter of disclosure, really.
Okay.
It's just responding to a federal requirement for disclosure and to bracket the full array of alternatives.
On the two,
And what you're saying is,
the second question, and then I won't continue, but on the second question, you have listed the desal plant in Morro Bay, and you have listed Whale Rock in San Luis Obispo. Have you checked with them to make sure that they're willing to share resources with Cambria?
we have met with the Morro Bay, the managers at Morro Bay.
You have met with Morro Bay?
And well, Morro Bay, yes.
When was it? Because I've had contact with them too.
I believe Bob and our engineer, Jane Grandin, met with them. I believe that was last year, wasn't it, Bob, 2013?
Yes, I can help out here if that's acceptable.
I don't remember the exact date, but I know
the
you did.
technical team, which was the CDM group and Jane Grandin with the Army Corps and myself, were very involved in making contact with Morro Bay in 2012. It was more on a technical level with their engineer at the time, Dylan Wade, and the indications were that that was being discussed at a higher level among his supervisors at least, and it was pretty positive at least at that level. I can't say we sat down with the mayor or city councilman or people like that at that point in time. It was strictly at a technical level, and it was all quite positive, and we toured their facility on several occasions down there, talked about some of the issues they were having with it at the time, how they were operating it, and how it could be expanded in the future. And then on the Whale Rock alternative, those discussions were more with the operating personnel for the Whale Rock Reservoir, and then with the utilities manager at that for the city of San Luis Obispo. They are the main controlling interests, and in fact, Jerry and I had a meeting, about 2 or 3 months back with some of the same people at the city of San Luis Obispo, and it was pretty positive. It definitely has to be brought forward to a Whale Rock Commission meeting, just as a outreach and informative type discussion at that level, and they were going to advise us of the availability to sit down or present at a future Whale Rock Commission meeting, so they would learn those details. But I was facilitating a lot of that communication at the local level because I'm here versus the Corps being down in LA, and it was part of it was being as efficient as we could with time.
Okay,
So
Bob.
I hope that answers the question.
Okay,
Let me jump in here. Director Rice has a comment, and I think then we'll call a halt to this because it's very difficult to converse with someone that you can't see. And I think perhaps by next month, the person who's ill might be sufficiently recovered to come and we could revisit this issue next month and get a little bit more of an update. So, Director Rice, if you
I'd like to move that we receive this report and place an item on a future agenda regarding our dissatisfaction and frustration with the current process and what we should be doing about it.
Okay, then Director Berenger has a...
I have a brief question, and I think it's important. I think we changed, brackish water and Whale Rock. You've been doing some studying, and I believe that the consultant is involved in doing that. How far along has the consultant traveled on the new path, eliminating off-stream storage and inserting Morro Bay? Are they already working on that, or is that something that can be reviewed or reconsidered? I don't want to slow anything down, and I also understand that you had to throw in another alternative because NEPA requires it. I'm not as sensitive to that, but is the consultant working every day on this project, and what's the status of that?
CDM was in charge of analyzing or describing the alternatives that came out of the discussions over the summer, and they did do an analysis on the alternatives and came out with this short list that was presented to Chambers for analysis. So they had arrived at the fact that the cost, they did some initial cost estimates, and
I made a motion.
Okay.
Was there not going to be a second on that motion?
Could you repeat your motion, please?
I move that we receive the report from the Army Corps and place an item on a future agenda item regarding our dissatisfaction and frustration with the current process and what we should be doing about it.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. And thank you, Army Corps of Engineers, for your update. But as you can tell, there were probably more questions and concerns than answers. And we hope that when this is scheduled again, we'll be able to have someone present to discuss it with the board.
we can provide a follow-up for next month and include the reports and the analysis that we have from CDM. We weren't prepared for that today. We were expecting to just focus on the EIS and questions that Bob had brought to our attention. So we will follow up and provide additional information for next month's meeting.
Thank you very much.
We'll coordinate with Bob on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, board, moving back to the agenda, we have before us item 9C. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, President Thompson. This item 9C is discussion and consideration to adopt ordinance 01-2013, amending subsection B of section 8.04.110 of the CSD Municipal Code related to affordable housing program. The recommendation before the board today is it recommended that the Board of Directors waive further reading, read by title only, and adopt ordinance 01-2013, amending subsection B of section 8.04.110 of the CCSD Municipal Code relating to affordable housing. And below is a brief discussion of where we are and why we are here at this point.
And this was introduced at the last meeting.
Correct,
So this is
correct.
good. Director
I
Robinette.
move.
Go ahead.
Shall I move? Okay. I move that we waive further reading and read by title only and adopt ordinance 01-2013, amending subsection B of section 8.04.110 of the CCSD Municipal Code relating to the affordable housing program.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
That motion is approved. Thank you. Item 9D, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, President Thompson, board members. Item 9D is discussion and consideration to adopt ordinance 02-2013, amending subsection B of section 8.04.110 of the Cambria Services Municipal Code in order to prohibit transfers that would result in multiple positions on a parcel.
Okay,
The
that was introduced last month also, so I think that's sufficient.
I move.
I just want one thing. This isn't going backwards, so there's some grandfathered properties, but we did discuss maybe contacting those folks and trying to resolve that. Can we have staff at least try to talk to them and get them in compliance with this ordinance?
That's correct. That's what staff understands, and that's
Thank
what
you.
we'll be doing.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I move that we waive further reading and read only by title only and adopt ordinance 02-2013, amending section 8.04.100 of the Cambria Community Services District Municipal Code to prohibit transfers that would result in multiple positions on a parcel.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Item 9E, Mr. General Manager.
Yes, item 9D before, thank you, President Thompson and board members. Item 9D before the board today is to cast ballot voting for special district member of the Local Agency Formation Commission, otherwise known as LAFCO, a term expiring December 2014. The recommendation is a cast ballot voting for LAFCO. special district member.
Thank you, Mr. Gruber. There are 3 individuals running for the position. I believe Mr. Olchilsky is serving as an alternate. Director Cliff, do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, I would recommend that Mr. Ohilsky be, our vote go for Mr. Ohilsky, based on the fact that he has been the alternate, and the alternate's not a real great position to be in because you most of the time sit in the audience, and he's been there every meeting, never missed a meeting, he's done his homework. He's currently sitting as the regular member because Ed Eby from Napomo didn't win re-election. Just as he's a land use attorney and he's very knowledgeable. Mr. Kluski is also a very qualified person, but he has done almost no campaigning, and since this is done by public vote, we know the vote count at any one time. And the vote, I mean, it really is between Mr. Ohilsky and Mr. Calvin. Mr. Calvin is a newly elected board member at San Miguel Community Services District. Pretty young, very impressive young man, but just doesn't. I don't think he has the experience that Mr. Ohilsky. And I would move that we register our vote for Mr. Ohilsky.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. I would just add that I would hope that perhaps, Mr. Clift, you could suggest to him that if there are issues, and of course you said in LAFCA, but that perhaps they might want to get input from the different districts if there are issues that affect the district. I know that sometimes it doesn't happen with other representatives, and so I would hope that he would want to keep in mind that you know, that we would like to have input on issues that would affect our community.
Will do.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion's approved. And with that, our agenda is concluded, and is there another item?
There's one kind of a
Wishful thinking, huh?
future agenda items.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to suggest that for consideration that we put on the agenda for future consideration the concept of maybe every bi-monthly or quarterly we have what we could refer to as a study session in which issues that are involved we don't get the chance to sit here and meet and talk. And if we did, rather than a workshop where it's kind of a back and forth thing, a study session would still allow public input on items, but it would allow us to sit here and talk about something without making decisions. And one of the advantages of that to me is that staff then would get, staff sometimes has to prepare reports and prepare MOUs and other things, hoping they've hit it right, rather than having some discussion ahead of time as to what our concerns are. And I would like to see if we did that maybe bi-monthly or once a quarter, where we're just having a chance to sit and talk, and if we're talking about what our thoughts are about the water, or what our thoughts are about the ranch, and we could have a list of topics and limit debate on them to if you want, but at least get some ideas so that we have some feelings ahead of time, so that we won't take hopefully as much time at meetings, and that staff will have a good understanding of what the philosophy of the board might be.
Question, so you mean as opposed to like a business type meeting where we're approving things like this, would the staff give us a report?
Well,
or
the staff could be available, but they wouldn't have to do as big a report as they're doing now. And we would kind of agree that we're not going to take any action during those meetings, that we're going to discuss issues that are ahead of us, so that we get all of the issues out before staff has to make
Is this in addition to the regular meeting, or in place of,
Others say maybe one. I was thinking that once a quarter or once every 2 months, and you could probably have that meeting at night too, which might help public input and have
Well, you added at night, and I fully supported it before you did that, but I'm.
I
with ya.
would support it too, as far as Mr. Hirsch is gone, but maybe it's good.
He's there.
Oh, he's there, okay.
Well, I don't know that Mr. Hirsch would have to be here.
Right. And
Because we're not going to take, if we have the agreement that no action will be taken, it's a matter of discussion. Because the problem I see is that some of these things come up, and like, you made a convincing argument. And had we talked about that ahead of time, it might have been.
Right, and well, that particular item was an MOU, and you know, I don't think it's locking anybody into it, and we can change it anytime we want. So,
Yeah.
but that's one thing. But yeah, I totally support the ability for us to discuss in generalities some issues, and I think it's important.
If we could just put that on the agenda for next time.
I agree.
We'll do it. And Mary, you're chomping at the bit.
Well, I just would like to speak on that. I don't know, if you can do that without having an agenda, because then people can
would.
say,
Yeah.
you would have an agenda, so
We
they
would
would
have an
know
agenda
what
of
you're
issues.
talking
Right.
about, so that they would make sure that they would make it, but then you could bring up other items, maybe.
Well, no.
It would be a,
It would
dis-
be for
it
that,
would be a
okay.
discussion
there would
item
be
on an issue.
agenda items and public comment would
I think
be
it's a
allowed
great,
on
I think it's a
each-
great
on each of the-
idea.
of
We could
the
get.
items.
We'd
I
have
think
food,
just-
light food, but not
That-
heavy
Since-
food, but.
Yeah.
Since it's not
But
on this
it would be
agenda,
good because it would
Okay, it's not on
clarify
this
so
agenda,
much.
but where it's an agenda item for
It's not really
next
on
month.
this agenda, so you can't take action on it, but you can direct it.
Okay, we-
But we can put it on next month.
We hear it, and we also, we have our commitment to have at least one night meeting in the near future, so if we can think in terms of when that would be a good time to happen. So I think maybe perhaps June would be a good time. Okay. All right, we are now adjourned. Thank you very much.